Chapter 13. But as soon as she went out, he got up, latched the door, undid the parcel which Razumihin had brought in that evening and had tied up again, and began dressing. Strange to say, he seemed immediately to have become perfectly calm, not a trace of his recent delirium nor of the panic fear that had haunted him of late. It was the first moment of a strange, sudden calm. His movements were precise and definite. A firm purpose was evident in them. Today, he muttered to himself. He understood that he was still weak, but his intense spiritual concentration gave him strength and self-confidence. He hoped, moreover, that he would not fall down in the street. When he had dressed in entirely new clothes, he looked at the money lying on the table, and after a moment's thought put it in his pocket. It was 25 rubles. He took also all the copper change from the 10 rubles spent by Razumihin on the clothes. Then he softly unlatched the door, went out, slipped downstairs and glanced in at the open kitchen door. Nastasia was standing with her back to him, blowing up the landlady's samovar. She heard nothing. Who would have dreamed of his going out? Truly, a minute later he was in the street. It was nearly 8 o'clock. The sun was setting. It was as stifling as before, but he eagerly drank in the stinking, dusty town air. His head felt rather dizzy. A sort of savage energy gleamed suddenly in his feverish eyes and his wasted, pale and yellow face. He did not know and did not think where he was going. He had one thought only, that all this must be ended today, once for all, immediately, that he would not return home without it, because he would not go on living like that. How, with what to make an end? He had not an idea about it. He did not even want to think of it. He drove away thought. Thought tortured him. All he knew, all he felt was that everything must be changed, one way or another, he repeated with desperate and immovable self-confidence and determination. From old habit he took his usual walk in the direction of the Haymarket. A dark-haired young man with a barrel organ was standing in the road in front of a little general shop and was grinding out a very sentimental song. He was accompanying a girl of 15, who stood on the pavement in front of him. She was dressed up in a crinoline, a mantle and a straw hat with a flame-colored feather in it, all very old and shabby. In a strong and rather agreeable voice, cracked and coarsened by street singing, she sang in hope of getting a copper from the shop. Raskolnikov joined 2 or 3 listeners, took out a 5-kopeck piece and put it in the girl's hand. She broke off abruptly on a sentimental high note, shouted sharply to the organ grinder, "Come on," and both moved on to the next shop. "Do you like street music?" said Raskolnikov, addressing a middle-aged man standing idly by him. The man looked at him, startled and wondering. "I love to hear singing to a street organ," said Raskolnikov, and his manner seemed strangely out of keeping with the subject. "I like it on cold, dark, damp autumn evenings. They must be damp, when all the passers-by have pale green, sickly faces, or better still when wet snow is falling straight down, when there's no wind, you know what I mean, and the street lamps shine through it." "I don't know. Excuse me," muttered the stranger, frightened by the question and Raskolnikov's strange manner, and he crossed over to the other side of the street. Raskolnikov walked straight on and came out at the corner of the Haymarket, where the huckster and his wife had talked with Lizaveta, but they were not there now. Recognizing the place, he stopped, looked round and addressed a young fellow in a red shirt who stood gaping before a corn chandler's shop. "Isn't there a man who keeps a booth with his wife at this corner?" "All sorts of people keep booths here," answered the young man, glancing superciliously at Raskolnikov. "What's his name?" "What he was christened." "Aren't you a Zaraski man, too?" "Which province?" The young man looked at Raskolnikov again. "It's not a province, Your Excellency, but a district." "Graciously forgive me, Your Excellency. Is that a tavern at the top there?" "Yes, it's an eating house, and there's a billiard room, and you'll find princesses there too, la la." Raskolnikov crossed the square. In that corner there was a dense crowd of peasants. He pushed his way into the thickest part of it, looking at the faces. He felt an unaccountable inclination to enter into conversation with people, but the peasants took no notice of him. They were all shouting in groups together. He stood and thought a little and took a turning to the right in the direction of V. He had often crossed that little street which turns at an angle, leading from the marketplace to Sadovy Street. Of late he had often felt drawn to wander about this district, when he felt depressed, that he may feel more so. Now he walked along, thinking of nothing. At that point there is a great block of buildings, entirely let out in dram shops and eating houses. Women were continually running in and out, bareheaded and in their indoor clothes. Here and there they gathered in groups on the pavement, especially about the entrances to various festive establishments in the lower stories. From one of these a loud din, sounds of singing, the tinkling of a guitar and shouts of merriment floated into the street. A crowd of women were thronging round the door. Some were sitting on the steps, others on the pavement, others were standing talking. A drunken soldier, smoking a cigarette, was walking near them in the road, swearing. He seemed to be trying to find his way somewhere, but had forgotten where. One beggar was quarreling with another, and a man dead drunk was lying right across the road. Raskolnikov joined the throng of women who were talking in husky voices. They were bareheaded and wore cotton dresses and goatskin shoes. There were women of 40, and some not more than 17. Almost all had blackened eyes. He felt strangely attracted by the singing, and all the noise and uproar in the saloon below. Someone could be heard within dancing frantically, marking time with his heels to the sounds of the guitar, and of a thin falsetto voice singing a jaunty air. He listened intently, gloomily and dreamily, bending down at the entrance and peeping inquisitively in from the pavement. "Oh, my handsome soldier, don't beat me for nothing," trilled the thin voice of the singer. Raskolnikov felt a great desire to make out what he was singing, as though everything depended on that. "Shall I go in?" he thought. "They are laughing. From drink. Shall I get drunk? Won't you come in?" One of the women asked him. Her voice was still musical, and less thick than the others. She was young and not repulsive, the only one of the group. "Why, she's pretty," he said, drawing himself up and looking at her. She smiled, much pleased at the compliment. "You're very nice looking yourself," she said. "Isn't he thin, though?" observed another woman in a deep bass. "Have you just come out of a hospital?" "They're all generals' daughters, it seems, but they have all snub noses," interposed a tipsy peasant with a sly smile on his face, wearing a loose coat. "See how jolly they are. Go along with you." "I'll go, sweetie," and he darted down into the saloon below. Raskolnikov moved on. "I say, sir," the girl shouted after him. "What is it?" She hesitated. "I'll always be pleased to spend an hour with you, kind gentleman, but now I feel shy. Give me 6 kopecks for a drink. There's a nice young man." Raskolnikov gave her what came first, 15 kopecks. "Ah, what a good-natured gentleman. What's your name?" "Ask for Ducklida." "Well, that's too much," one of the women observed, shaking her head at Ducklida. "I don't know how you can ask like that. I believe I should drop with shame." Raskolnikov looked curiously at the speaker. She was a pock-marked wench of 30, covered with bruises, with her upper lip swollen. She made her criticism quietly and earnestly. "Where is it?" thought Raskolnikov. "Where is it I've read that someone condemned to death says or thinks, an hour before his death, that if he had to live on some high rock, on such a narrow ledge that he'd only room to stand, and the ocean, everlasting darkness, everlasting solitude, everlasting tempest around him, if he had to remain standing on a square yard of space all his life, 1,000 years, eternity, it were better to live so than to die at once. Only to live and life, whatever it may be. How true it is. Good God, how true. Man is a vile creature, and vile is he who calls him vile for that," he added a moment later. He went into another street. "Bah, the Palais de Crystal." Razumihin was just talking of the Palais de Crystal. "But what on earth was it I wanted?" "Yes, the newspapers. Zosimov said he'd read it in the papers." "Have you the papers?" he asked, going into a very spacious and positively clean restaurant, consisting of several rooms, which were, however, rather empty. 2 or 3 people were drinking tea, and in a room further away were sitting 4 men drinking champagne. Raskolnikov fancied that Zametov was one of them, but he could not be sure at that distance. What if it is? He thought. Will you have vodka? Asked the waiter. Give me some tea and bring me the papers, the old ones for the last 5 days, and I'll give you something. Yes, sir, here's today's. No vodka. The old newspapers and the tea were brought. Raskolnikov sat down and began to look through them. Oh, damn, these are the items of intelligence. An accident on a staircase, spontaneous combustion of a shopkeeper from alcohol, a fire in Peskia, fire in the Petersburg quarter, another fire in the Petersburg quarter, and another fire in the Petersburg quarter. Ah, here it is. He found at last what he was seeking, and began to read it. The lines danced before his eyes, but he read it all and began eagerly seeking later editions in the following numbers. His hands shook with nervous impatience as he turned the sheets. Suddenly someone sat down beside him at his table. He looked up. It was the head clerk Zametov, looking just the same, with the rings on his fingers and the watch chain, with the curly, black hair, parted and pomaded, with the smart waistcoat, rather shabby coat and doubtful linen. He was in a good humor, at least he was smiling very gaily and good-humoredly. His dark face was rather flushed from the champagne he had drunk. What, you hear? He began in surprise, speaking as though he'd known him all his life. Why, Razumihin told me only yesterday you were unconscious. How strange. And do you know I've been to see you? Raskolnikov knew he would come up to him. He laid aside the papers and turned to Zametov. There was a smile on his lips, and a new shade of irritable impatience was apparent in that smile. I know you have, he answered. I've heard it. You looked for my sock, and you know Razumihin has lost his heart to you? He says you've been with him till Luise Ivanovna's, you know, the woman you tried to befriend, for whom you winked to the explosive lieutenant and he would not understand. Do you remember? How could he fail to understand? It was quite clear, wasn't it? What a hothead he is. The explosive one? No, your friend Razumihin. You must have a jolly life, Mr. Zametov. Entrance free to the most agreeable places. Who's been pouring champagne into you just now? We've just been having a drink together. You talk about pouring it into me. By way of a fee. You profit by everything. Raskolnikov laughed. It's all right, my dear boy, he added, slapping Zametov on the shoulder. I am not speaking from temper, but in a friendly way, for sport, as that workman of yours said when he was scuffling with Dmitri. In the case of the old woman. How do you know about it? Perhaps I know more about it than you do. How strange you are. I am sure you are still very unwell. You oughtn't to have come out. Oh, do I seem strange to you? Yes. What are you doing? Reading the papers? Yes. There's a lot about the fires. No, I am not reading about the fires. Here he looked mysteriously at Zametov. His lips were twisted again in a mocking smile. No, I am not reading about the fires, he went on, winking at Zametov. But confess now, my dear fellow, you're awfully anxious to know what I'm reading about. I am not in the least. Mayn't I ask a question? Why do you keep on? Listen, you are a man of culture and education? I was in the 6th class at the gymnasium, said Zametov with some dignity. 6th class. Ah, my cock sparrow, with your parting and your rings, you are a gentleman of fortune. Phew, what a charming boy. Here Raskolnikov broke into a nervous laugh right in Zametov's face. The latter drew back, more amazed than offended. Phew, how strange you are, Zametov repeated very seriously. I can't help thinking you are still delirious. I am delirious. You are fibbing, my cock sparrow. So I am strange? You find me curious, do you? Yes, curious. Shall I tell you what I was reading about? What I was looking for? See what a lot of papers I've made them bring me. Suspicious, eh? Well, what is it? You prick up your ears? How do you mean? Prick up my ears? I'll explain that afterwards, but now, my boy, I declare to you, no, Better I confess no, that's not right either. I make a deposition and you take it. I depose that I was reading, that I was looking and searching. He screwed up his eyes and paused. I was searching, and came here on purpose to do it. For news of the murder of the old pawnbroker woman, he articulated at last, almost in a whisper, bringing his face exceedingly close to the face of Zametov. Zametov looked at him steadily, without moving or drawing his face away. What struck Zametov afterwards as the strangest part of it all was that silence followed for exactly a minute, and that they gazed at one another all the while. "What if you have been reading about it?" he cried at last, perplexed and impatient. "That's no business of mine." "What of it?" The same old woman, Raskolnikov went on in the same whisper, not heeding Zametov's explanation, "about whom you were talking in the police office, you remember, when I fainted." "Well, do you understand now?" "What do you mean?" "Understand what?" Zametov brought out, almost alarmed. Raskolnikov's set and earnest face was suddenly transformed, and he suddenly went off into the same nervous laugh as before, as though utterly unable to restrain himself. And in one flash he recalled with extraordinary vividness of sensation a moment in the recent past, that moment when he stood with the axe behind the door, while the latch trembled and the men outside swore and shook it, and he had a sudden desire to shout at them, to swear at them, to put out his tongue at them, to mock them, to laugh, and laugh, and laugh. "You are either mad," or began Zametov, and he broke off, as though stunned by the idea that had suddenly flashed into his mind. Or what? What? Come, tell me." "Nothing," said Zametov, getting angry. "It's all nonsense." Both were silent. After his sudden fit of laughter, Raskolnikov became suddenly thoughtful and melancholy. He put his elbow on the table and leaned his head on his hand. He seemed to have completely forgotten Zametov. The silence lasted for some time. "Why don't you drink your tea?" "It's getting cold," said Zametov. "What, tea?" "Oh, yes." Raskolnikov sipped the glass, put a morsel of bread in his mouth and, suddenly looking at Zametov, seemed to remember everything and pulled himself together. At the same moment his face resumed its original mocking expression. He went on drinking tea. "There have been a great many of these crimes lately," said Zametov. "Only the other day I read in the Moscow news that a whole gang of false coiners had been caught in Moscow. It was a regular society. They used to forge tickets." "Oh, but it was a long time ago. I read about it a month ago," Raskolnikov answered calmly. "So you consider them criminals?" he added, smiling. "Of course they are criminals. They are children, simpletons, not criminals. Why, 100 people meeting for such an object. What an idea. 3 would be too many, and then they want to have more faith in one another than in themselves. One has only to blab in his cups and it all collapses. Simpletons. They engaged untrustworthy people to change the notes. What a thing to trust to a casual stranger. Well, let us suppose that these simpletons succeed and each makes 1,000,000, and what follows for the rest of their lives? Each is dependent on the others for the rest of his life. Better hang oneself at once. And they did not know how to change the notes either. The man who changed the notes took 5,000 rubles, and his hands trembled. He counted the first 4,000, but did not count the 5,000. He was in such a hurry to get the money into his pocket and run away. Of course he roused suspicion, and the whole thing came to a crash through one fool. Is it possible that his hands trembled?" observed Zametov. "Yes, that's quite possible. That, I feel quite sure, is possible. Sometimes one can't stand things." "Can't stand that? Why, could you stand it then?" "No, I couldn't. For the sake of 100 rubles to face such a terrible experience, to go with false notes into a bank where it's their business to spot that sort of thing. No, I should not have the face to do it. Would you?" Raskolnikov had an intense desire again to put his tongue out. Shivers kept running down his spine. I should do it quite differently, Raskolnikov began. This is how I would change the notes. I'd count the first 1,003 or 4 times backwards and forwards, looking at every note, and then I'd set to the second 1,000. I'd count that halfway through and then hold some 50-ruble note to the light, then turn it, then hold it to the light again, to see whether it was a good one. I am afraid, I would say, a relation of mine lost 25 rubles the other day through a false note, and then I'd tell them the whole story. And after I began counting the third, no, excuse me, I would say, I fancy I made a mistake in the 700 in that second 1,000, I'm not sure. And so I would give up the third 1,000 and go back to the second and so on to the end. And when I had finished, I'd pick out one from the fifth and one from the second 1,000 and take them again to the light and ask again, change them, please, and put the clerk into such a stew that he would not know how to get rid of me. When I'd finished and had gone out, I'd come back, no, excuse me, and ask for some explanation. That's how I'd do it. Phew, what terrible things you say, said Zametov, laughing. But all that is only talk. I dare say when it came to deeds you'd make a slip. I believe that even a practiced, desperate man cannot always reckon on himself, much less you and I. To take an example near home, that old woman murdered in our district. The murderer seems to have been a desperate fellow. He risked everything in open daylight, was saved by a miracle, but his hands shook, too. He did not succeed in robbing the place. He couldn't stand it. That was clear from the Raskolnikov seemed offended. Clear? Why don't you catch him then? He cried, maliciously jibing at Zametov. Well, they will catch him. Who? You? Do you suppose you could catch him? You've a tough job. A great point for you is whether a man is spending money or not. If he had no money and suddenly begins spending, he must be the man, so that any child can mislead you. The fact is they always do that, though, answered Zametov. A man will commit a clever murder at the risk of his life, and then at once he goes drinking in a tavern. They are caught spending money. They are not all as cunning as you are. You wouldn't go to a tavern, of course. Raskolnikov frowned and looked steadily at Zametov. You seem to enjoy the subject and would like to know how I should behave in that case, too, he asked with displeasure. I should like to, Zametov answered firmly and seriously. Somewhat too much earnestness began to appear in his words and looks. Very much, very much. All right then. This is how I should behave, Raskolnikov began, again bringing his face close to Zametov's, again staring at him and speaking in a whisper, so that the latter positively shuddered. This is what I should have done. I should have taken the money and jewels. I should have walked out of there and have gone straight to some deserted place with fences round it and scarcely anyone to be seen, some kitchen garden or place of that sort. I should have looked out before and some stone weighing 100 weight or more which had been lying in the corner from the time the house was built. I would lift that stone. There would sure to be a hollow under it, and I would put the jewels and money in that hole. Then I'd roll the stone back so that it would look as before, would press it down with my foot and walk away. And for a year or 2, 3 maybe, I would not touch it. And, well, they could search. There'd be no trace. You are a madman, said Zametov, and for some reason he too spoke in a whisper and moved away from Raskolnikov, whose eyes were glittering. He had turned fearfully pale, and his upper lip was twitching and quivering. He bent down as close as possible to Zametov, and his lips began to move without uttering a word. This lasted for half a minute. He knew what he was doing, but could not restrain himself. The terrible word trembled on his lips like the latch on that door. In another moment it will break out. In another moment he will let it go. He will speak out. And what if it was I who murdered the old woman and Lizaveta? He said suddenly and realized what he had done. Zametov looked wildly at him and turned white as the tablecloth. His face wore a contorted smile. But is it possible? He brought out faintly. Raskolnikov looked wrathfully at him. Own up that you believed it. Yes, you did. Not a bit of it. I believe it less than ever now, Zametov cried hastily. I've caught my cock sparrow. So you did believe it before, if now you believe less than ever? Not at all, cried Zametov, obviously embarrassed. Have you been frightening me so as to lead up to this? You don't believe it then? What were you talking about behind my back when I went out of the police office? And why did the explosive lieutenant question me after I fainted? Hey, there, he shouted to the waiter, getting up and taking his cap. How much? 30 kopecks, the latter replied, running up. And there is 20 kopecks for vodka. See what a lot of money. He held out his shaking hand to Zametov with notes in it, red notes and blue, 25 rubles. Where did I get them? And where did my new clothes come from? You know I had not a kopeck. You've cross-examined my landlady. I'll be bound. Well, that's enough. Assess cows, till we meet again. He went out, trembling all over from a sort of wild hysterical sensation, in which there was an element of insufferable rapture. Yet he was gloomy and terribly tired. His face was twisted as after a fit. His fatigue increased rapidly. Any shock, any irritating sensation stimulated and revived his energies at once, but his strength failed as quickly when the stimulus was removed. Zametov, left alone, sat for a long time in the same place, plunged in thought. Raskolnikov had unwittingly worked a revolution in his brain on a certain point, and had made up his mind for him conclusively. Ilya Petrovitch is a blockhead, he decided. Raskolnikov had hardly opened the door of the restaurant when he stumbled against Razumihin on the steps. They did not see each other till they almost knocked against each other. For a moment they stood looking each other up and down. Razumihin was greatly astounded. Then anger, real anger, gleamed fiercely in his eyes. So here you are, he shouted at the top of his voice. You ran away from your bed, and here I've been looking for you under the sofa. We went up to the garret. I almost beat Nastasia on your account, and here he is after all. Radia, what is the meaning of it? Tell me the whole truth. Confess. Do you hear? It means that I'm sick to death of you all and I want to be alone, Raskolnikov answered calmly. Alone? When you are not able to walk, when your face is as white as a sheet and you are gasping for breath. Idiot! What have you been doing in the Palais de Crystal? Own up at once. Let me go, said Raskolnikov and tried to pass him. This was too much for Razumihin. He gripped him firmly by the shoulder. Let you go? You dare tell me to let you go? Do you know what I'll do with you directly? I'll pick you up, tie you up in a bundle, carry you home under my arm and lock you up. Listen, Razumihin, Raskolnikov began quietly, apparently calm. Can't you see that I don't want your benevolence? A strange desire you have to shower benefits on a man who curses them, who feels them a burden in fact. Why did you seek me out at the beginning of my illness? Maybe I was very glad to die. Didn't I tell you plainly enough today that you were torturing me, that I was sick of you? You seem to want to torture people. I assure you that all that is seriously hindering my recovery, because it's continually irritating me. You saw Zosimov went away just now to avoid irritating me. You leave me alone too, for goodness sake. What right have you, truly, to keep me by force? Don't you see that I am in possession of all my faculties now? How can I persuade you not to persecute me with your kindness? I may be ungrateful, I may be mean, only let me be, for God's sake, let me be, let me be, let me be. He began calmly, gloating beforehand over the venomous phrases he was about to utter, but finished, panting for breath, in a frenzy as he had been with Luzhin. Razumihin stood a moment, thought, and let his hand drop. Well, go to hell then, he said gently and thoughtfully. Stay, he roared, as Raskolnikov was about to move. Listen to me. Let me tell you that you are all a set of babbling, posing idiots. If you've any little trouble you brood over it like a hen over an egg. And you are plagiarists evening in that. There isn't the sign of independent life in you. You are made of spermaceti ointment and you've lymph in your veins instead of blood. I don't believe in any one of you. In any circumstances the first thing for all of you is to be unlike a human being. Stop, he cried with redoubled fury, noticing that Raskolnikov was again making a movement. "Hear me out. You know I'm having a housewarming this evening. I dare say they've arrived by now, but I left my uncle there. I just ran in to receive the guests. And if you weren't a fool, a common fool, a perfect fool, if you were an original instead of a translation, you see, Radia, I recognize you're a clever fellow, but you're a fool. And if you weren't a fool, you'd come round to me this evening instead of wearing out your boots in the street. Since you have gone out, there's no help for it. I'd give you a snug, easy chair. My landlady has won a cup of tea. Company, or you could lie on the sofa. Anyway, you would be with us. Sosimov will be there too. Will you come?" "No, rubbish," Razumihin shouted, out of patience. "How do you know? You can't answer for yourself. You don't know anything about it. Thousands of times I've fought tooth and nail with people and run back to them afterwards. One feels ashamed and goes back to a man. So remember, Pochinkov's house on the 3rd story. Why, Mr. Razumihin, I do believe you'd let anybody beat you from sheer benevolence." "Beat whom?" "Me." I'd twist his nose off at the mere idea. Pochinkov's house, 47, Babushkin's flat. "I shall not come, Razumihin." Raskolnikov turned and walked away. "I bet you will," Razumihin shouted after him. "I refuse to know you if you don't. Stay, hey, is Samatov in there?" "Yes." "Did you see him?" "Yes." "Talked to him?" "Yes." "What about?" "Confound you. Don't tell me then." Pochinkov's house, 47, Babushkin's flat, remember. Raskolnikov walked on and turned the corner into Sadovy Street. Razumihin looked after him thoughtfully. Then, with a wave of his hand, he went into the house, but stopped short of the stairs. "Confound it," he went on almost aloud. "He talked sensibly, but yet I am a fool. As if madmen didn't talk sensibly." And this was just what Zosimov seemed afraid of. He struck his finger on his forehead. "What if? How could I let him go off alone? He may drown himself. What a blunder. I can't." And he ran back to overtake Raskolnikov, but there was no trace of him. With a curse, he returned with rapid steps to the Palais de Crystal to question Zametov. Raskolnikov walked straight to X Bridge, stood in the middle, and leaning both elbows on the rail stared into the distance. On parting with Razumihin, he felt so much weaker that he could scarcely reach this place. He longed to sit or lie down somewhere in the street. Bending over the water, he gazed mechanically at the last pink flush of the sunset, at the row of houses growing dark in the gathering twilight, at one distant attic window on the left bank, flashing as though on fire in the last rays of the setting sun, at the darkening water of the canal, and the water seemed to catch his attention. At last red circles flashed before his eyes, the houses seemed moving, the passers-by, the canal banks, the carriages, all danced before his eyes. Suddenly he started, saved again perhaps from swooning by an uncanny and hideous sight. He became aware of someone standing on the right side of him. He looked and saw a tall woman with a kerchief on her head, with a long, yellow, wasted face and red sunken eyes. She was looking straight at him, but obviously she saw nothing and recognized no one. Suddenly she leaned her right hand on the parapet, lifted her right leg over the railing, then her left, and threw herself into the canal. The filthy water parted and swallowed up its victim for a moment, but an instant later the drowning woman floated to the surface, moving slowly with the current, her head and legs in the water, her skirt inflated like a balloon over her back. "A woman drowning! A woman drowning!" shouted dozens of voices. People ran up. Both banks were thronged with spectators. On the bridge, people crowded about Raskolnikov, pressing up behind him. "Mercy on it! It's our Afrosinya!" a woman cried tearfully close by. "Mercy! Save her! Kind people, pull her out!" A boat, was shouted in the crowd, but there was no need of a boat. A policeman ran down the steps to the canal, threw off his great coat and his boots and rushed into the water. It was easy to reach her. She floated within a couple of yards from the steps. He caught hold of her clothes with his right hand, and with his left seized a pole, which a comrade held out to him. The drowning woman was pulled out at once. They laid her on the granite pavement of the embankment. She soon recovered consciousness. raised her head, sat up, and began sneezing and coughing, stupidly wiping her wet dress with her hands. She said nothing. She's drunk herself out of her senses. The same woman's voice wailed at her side. Out of her senses. The other day she tried to hang herself. We cut her down. I ran out to the shop just now, left my little girl to look after her, and here she's in trouble again. A neighbor, gentlemen, a neighbor. We live close by, the second house from the end. See over there the crowd broke up. The police still remained round the woman. Someone mentioned the police station. Raskolnikov looked on with a strange sensation of indifference and apathy. He felt disgusted. No, that's loathsome water, it's not good enough, he muttered to himself. Nothing will come of it, he added. No use to wait. What about the police office, and why isn't Zametov at the police office? The police office is open till 10 o'clock. He turned his back to the railing and looked about him. Very well then, he said resolutely. He moved from the bridge and walked in the direction of the police office. His heart felt hollow and empty. He did not want to think. Evening, his depression had passed. There was not a trace now of the energy with which he had set out to make an end of it all. Complete apathy had succeeded to it. Well, it's a way out of it, he thought, walking slowly and listlessly along the canal bank. Anyway, I'll make an end, for I want to, but is it a way out? What does it matter? There'll be the square yard of space, ha! But what an end! Is it really the end? Shall I tell them or not? Adam, how tired I am! If I could find somewhere to sit or lie down soon. What I am most ashamed of is its being so stupid. But I don't care about that either. What idiotic ideas come into one's head. To reach the police office he had to go straight forward and take the second turning to the left. It was only a few paces away, but at the first turning he stopped and, after a minute's thought, turned into a side street and went 2 streets out of his way, possibly without any object, or possibly to delay a minute and gain time. He walked, looking at the ground. Suddenly someone seemed to whisper in his ear. He lifted his head and saw that he was standing at the very gate of the house. He had not passed it, he had not been near it since that evening. An overwhelming, unaccountable prompting drew him on. He went into the house, passed through the gateway, then into the first entrance on the right, and began mounting the familiar staircase to the 4th story. The narrow, steep staircase was very dark. He stopped at each landing and looked round him with curiosity. On the first landing, the framework of the window had been taken out. That wasn't so then, he thought. Here was the flat on the 2nd story, where Nikolay and Dmitri had been working. It's shut up and the door newly painted, so it's to let. Then the 3rd story and the 4th. Here, he was perplexed to find the door of the flat wide open. There were men there, he could hear voices. He had not expected that. After brief hesitation he mounted the last stairs and went into the flat. It, too, was being done up. There were workmen in it. This seemed to amaze him. He somehow fancied that he would find everything as he left it, even perhaps the corpses in the same places on the floor. And now, bare walls, no furniture. It seemed strange. He walked to the window and sat down on the window-sill. There were 2 workmen, both young fellows, but one much younger than the other. They were papering the walls with a new white paper covered with lilac flowers instead of the old, dirty, yellow one. Raskolnikov, for some reason, felt horribly annoyed by this. He looked at the new paper with dislike, as though he felt sorry to have it all so changed. The workmen had obviously stayed beyond their time, and now they were hurriedly rolling up their paper and getting ready to go home. They took no notice of Raskolnikov's coming in. They were talking. Raskolnikov folded his arms and listened. "She comes to me in the morning," said the elder to the younger, "very early, all dressed up. 'Why are you preening and pranking?' says I. 'I am ready to do anything to please you, Tit Vassilitch.' That's a way of going on. And she dressed up like a regular fashion book." "And what is a fashion book?" the younger one asked. He obviously regarded the other as an authority. A fashion book is a lot of pictures, colored, and they come to the tailors here every Saturday by post from abroad to show folks how to dress, the male sex as well as the female. They're pictures. The gentlemen are generally wearing fur coats, and for the ladies fluffles, they're beyond anything you can fancy. There's nothing you can't find in Petersburg. The younger cried enthusiastically, except father and mother. There's everything. Except them. There's everything to be found, my boy, the elder declared sententiously. Raskolnikov got up and walked into the other room where the strong box, the bed, and the chest of drawers had been. The room seemed to him very tiny without furniture in it. The paper was the same. The paper in the corner showed where the case of icons had stood. He looked at it and went to the window. The elder workman looked at him askance. "What do you want?" he asked suddenly. Instead of answering, Raskolnikov went into the passage and pulled the bell. The same bell, the same cracked note. He rang it a second, and a third time. He listened and remembered. The hideous and agonizingly fearful sensation he had felt then began to come back more and more vividly. He shuddered at every ring, and it gave him more and more satisfaction. "Well, what do you want? Who are you?" the workman shouted, going out to him. Raskolnikov went inside again. "I want to take a flat," he said. "I am looking round. It's not the time to look at rooms at night, and you ought to come up with the porter. The floors have been washed. Will they be painted?" Raskolnikov went on. "Is there no blood?" "What blood?" "Why, the old woman and her sister were murdered here. There was a perfect pool there." "But who are you?" the workman cried, uneasy. "Who am I? Yes, you want to know? Come to the police station, I'll tell you." The workman looked at him in amazement. "It's time for us to go. We are late. Come along, Alavasha." "We must lock up," said the elder workman. "Very well, come along," said Raskolnikov indifferently, and going out first, he went slowly downstairs. "Hey, porter," he cried in the gateway. At the entrance several people were standing, staring at the passers-by. The two porters, a peasant woman, a man in a long coat, and a few others. Raskolnikov went straight up to them. "What do you want?" asked one of the porters. "Have you been to the police office?" "I've just been there." "What do you want?" "Is it open?" "Of course." "Is the assistant there?" "He was there for a time." "What do you want?" Raskolnikov made no reply, but stood beside them lost in thought. "He's been to look at the flat," said the elder workman, coming forward. "Which flat?" "Where we are at work." "Why have you washed away the blood?" Says he. "There has been a murder here," says he, "and I've come to take it." And he began ringing at the bell, all but broke it. "Come to the police station," says he. "I'll tell you everything there." He wouldn't leave us. The porter looked at Raskolnikov, frowning and perplexed. "Who are you?" he shouted as impressively as he could. "I am Rodion Romanovich Raskolnikov, formerly a student. I live in Shill's house, not far from here, flat number 14. Ask the porter, he knows me." Raskolnikov said all this in a lazy, dreamy voice, not turning round, but looking intently into the darkening street. "Why have you been to the flat?" "To look at it." "What is there to look at?" "Take him straight to the police station," the man in the long coat jerked in abruptly. Raskolnikov looked intently at him over his shoulder, and said in the same slow, lazy tones, "Come along." "Yes, take him." The man went on more confidently. Why was he going into that? What's in his mind? He's not drunk, but God knows what's the matter with him, muttered the workman. "But what do you want?" the porter shouted again, beginning to get angry in earnest. "Why are you hanging about?" "You funk the police station then?" said Raskolnikov jeeringly. "How funk it? Why are you hanging about?" "He's a rogue," shouted the peasant woman. "Why waste time talking to him?" cried the other porter, a huge peasant in a full open coat, and with keys on his belt. "Get along. He is a rogue, and no mistake. Get along." And seizing Raskolnikov by the shoulder he flung him into the street. He lurched forward, but recovered his footing. looked at the spectators in silence, and walked away. "Strange man," observed the workman. "There are strange folks about nowadays," said the woman. "You should have taken him to the police station all the same," said the man in the long coat. "Better have nothing to do with him," decided the big porter. "A regular rogue, just what he wants, you may be sure. But once take him up, you won't get rid of him. We know the sort. Shall I go there or not?" thought Raskolnikov, standing in the middle of the thoroughfare at the crossroads, and he looked about him, as though expecting from someone a decisive word. But no sound came. All was dead and silent like the stones on which he walked, dead to him alone. All at once, at the end of the street, 200 yards away, in the gathering dusk, he saw a crowd and heard talk and shouts. In the middle of the crowd stood a carriage. A light gleamed in the middle of the street. "What is it?" Raskolnikov turned to the right and went up to the crowd. Chapter 14. An elegant carriage stood in the middle of the road with a pair of spirited grey horses. There was no one in it, and the coachman had got off his box and stood by. The horses were being held by the bridle. A mass of people had gathered round, the police standing in front. One of them held a lighted lantern, which he was turning on something lying close to the wheels. Everyone was talking, shouting, exclaiming. The coachman seemed at a loss and kept repeating, "What a misfortune! Good Lord, what a misfortune!" Raskolnikov pushed his way in as far as he could, and succeeded at last in seeing the object of the commotion and interest. On the ground a man who had been run over lay apparently unconscious, and covered with blood. He was very badly dressed, but not like a workman. Blood was flowing from his head and face. His face was crushed, mutilated, and disfigured. He was evidently badly injured. "Merciful heaven!" wailed the coachman. "What more could I do? If I'd been driving fast or had not shouted to him. But I was going quietly, not in a hurry. Everyone could see I was going along just like everybody else. A drunken man can't walk straight. We all know. I saw him crossing the street, staggering and almost falling. I shouted again and a second and a third time. Then I held the horses in, but he fell straight under their feet. Either he did it on purpose or he was very tipsy. The horses are young and ready to take fright. They started. He screamed. That made them worse. That's how it happened. That's just how it was," a voice in the crowd confirmed. He shouted. "That's true," he shouted 3 times. Another voice declared. 3 times it was. "We all heard it," shouted a third. But the coachman was not very much distressed and frightened. It was evident that the carriage belonged to a rich and important person who was awaiting it somewhere. The police, of course, were in no little anxiety to avoid upsetting his arrangements. All they had to do was to take the injured man to the police station and the hospital. No one knew his name. Meanwhile Raskolnikov had squeezed in and stooped closer over him. The lantern suddenly lighted up the unfortunate man's face. He recognized him. I know him," he shouted, pushing to the front. "It's a government clerk retired from the service, Marmeladov. He lives close by in Kozel's house. Make haste for a doctor. I will pay. See." He pulled money out of his pocket and showed it to the policeman. He was in violent agitation. The police were glad that they had found out who the man was. Raskolnikov gave his own name and address, and, as earnestly as if it had been his father, he besought the police to carry the unconscious Marmeladov to his lodging at once. "Just here, 3 houses away," he said eagerly. "The house belongs to Kozel, a rich German. He was going home, no doubt drunk. I know him. He is a drunkard. He has a family there, a wife, children. He has 1 daughter. It will take time to take him to the hospital, and there is sure to be a doctor in the house. I'll pay. At least he will be looked after at home. They will help him at once. But he'll die before you get him to the hospital." He managed to slip something unseen into the policeman's hand, but the thing was straightforward and legitimate, and in any case help was closer here. They raised the injured man. People volunteered to help. Kozel's house was 30 yards away. Raskolnikov walked behind, carefully holding Marmeladov's head and showing the way. This way, we must take him upstairs head foremost. Turn round, I'll pay, I'll make it worth your while, he muttered. Katerina Ivanovna had just begun, as she always did at every free moment, walking to and fro in her little room from window to stove and back again, with her arms folded across her chest, talking to herself and coughing. Of late she had begun to talk more than ever to her eldest girl, Polenka, a child of 10, who, though there was much she did not understand, understood very well that her mother needed her, and so always watched her with her big clever eyes and strove her utmost to appear to understand. This time Polenka was undressing her little brother, who had been unwell all day and was going to bed. The boy was waiting for her to take off his shirt, which had to be washed at night. He was sitting straight and motionless on a chair, with a silent, serious face, with his legs stretched out straight before him, heels together and toes turned out. He was listening to what his mother was saying to his sister, sitting perfectly still with pouting lips and wide-open eyes, just as all good little boys have to sit when they are undressed to go to bed. A little girl, still younger, dressed literally in rags, stood at the screen, waiting for her turn. The door onto the stairs was open to relieve them a little from the clouds of tobacco smoke, which floated in from the other rooms, and brought on long terrible fits of coughing in the poor, consumptive woman. Katerina Ivanovna seemed to have grown evening thinner during that week, and the hectic flush on her face was brighter than ever. You wouldn't believe, you can't imagine, Polenka, she said, walking about the room, what a happy luxurious life we had in my papa's house, and how this drunkard has brought me, and will bring you all, to ruin. Papa was a civil colonel and only a step from being a governor, so that everyone who came to see him said, "We look upon you, Ivan Mikhailovich, as our governor." When she coughed violently, "Oh, cursed life," she cried, clearing her throat and pressing her hands to her breast. When I went at the last ball, at the Marshal's, Princess Bezamelny saw me, who gave me the blessing when your father and I were married. Polenka, she asked at once, isn't that the pretty girl who danced the shawl dance at the breaking up? You must mend that tear, you must take your needle and darn it as I showed you, or tomorrow, cough, 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 he will make the hole bigger, she articulated with effort. Prince Shekelskoy, a kammerjunker, had just come from Petersburg then. He danced the mazurka with me and wanted to make me an offer next day, but I thanked him in flattering expressions and told him that my heart had long been another's. That other was your father, Polya. Papa was fearfully angry. Is the water ready? Give me the shirt, and the stockings. Lida, said she to the youngest one, you must manage without your chemise tonight and lay your stockings out with it. I'll wash them together. How is it that drunken vagabond doesn't come in? He has worn his shirt till it looks like a dishclout. He has torn it to rags. I'd do it all together, so as not to have to work 2 nights running. Oh, dear, cough, 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 cough. Again. What's this? She cried, noticing a crowd in the passage and the men, who were pushing into her room, carrying a burden. What is it? What are they bringing? Mercy on us! Where are we to put him? Asked the policeman, looking round when Marmeladov, unconscious and covered with blood, had been carried in. On the sofa. Put him straight on the sofa. With his head this way, Raskolnikov showed him. Run over in the road. Drunk, someone shouted in the passage. Katerina Ivanovna stood, turning white and gasping for breath. The children were terrified. Little Lida screamed, rushed to Polenka and clutched at her, trembling all over. Having laid Marmeladov down, Raskolnikov flew to Katerina Ivanovna. For God's sake, be calm. Don't be frightened, he said. Speaking quickly, he was crossing the road and was run over by a carriage. Don't be frightened, he will come to. I told them bring him here. I've been here already. You remember. He will come to. I'll pay. He's done it this time. Katerina Ivanovna cried despairingly, and she rushed to her husband. Raskolnikov noticed at once that she was not one of those women who swoon easily. She instantly placed under the luckless man's head a pillow, which no one had thought of, and began undressing and examining him. She kept her head, forgetting herself, biting her trembling lips and stifling the screams which were ready to break from her. Raskolnikov meanwhile induced someone to run for a doctor. There was a doctor, it appeared, next door but one. "I've sent for a doctor," he kept assuring Katerina Ivanovna. "Don't be uneasy, I'll pay. Haven't you water? And give me a napkin or a towel, anything, as quick as you can. He is injured, but not killed, believe me. We shall see what the doctor says." Katerina Ivanovna ran to the window. There, on a broken chair in the corner, a large earthenware basin full of water had been stood, in readiness for washing her children's and husband's linen that night. This washing was done by Katerina Ivanovna at night at least twice a week, if not oftener, for the family had come to such a pass that they were practically without change of linen, and Katerina Ivanovna could not endure uncleanliness, and rather than see dirt in the house, she preferred to wear herself out at night, working beyond her strength when the rest were asleep, so as to get the wet linen hung on a line and dry by the morning. She took up the basin of water at Raskolnikov's request, but almost fell down with her burden. But the latter had already succeeded in finding a towel, wetted it, and began washing the blood off Marmeladov's face. Katerina Ivanovna stood by, breathing painfully and pressing her hands to her breast. She was in need of attention herself. Raskolnikov began to realize that he may have made a mistake in having the injured man brought here. The policeman, too, stood in hesitation. "Polenka," cried Katerina Ivanovna, "run to Sonya, make haste. If you don't find her at home, leave word that her father has been run over and that she is to come here at once when she comes in. Run, Polenka. There, put on the shawl. Run your fastest," cried the little boy on the chair suddenly, after which he relapsed into the same dumb rigidity, with round eyes, his heels thrust forward and his toes spread out. Meanwhile the room had become so full of people that you couldn't have dropped a pin. The policeman left, all except one, who remained for a time, trying to drive out the people who came in from the stairs. Almost all Madame Lippevechsel's lodgers had streamed in from the inner rooms of the flat. At first they were squeezed together in the doorway, but afterwards they overflowed into the room. Katerina Ivanovna flew into a fury. "You may let him die in peace, at least," she shouted at the crowd. "Is it a spectacle for you to gape at? With cigarettes. Cough, cough, cough. You may as well keep your hats on, and there is one in his hat. Get away. You should respect the dead, at least." Her cough choked her, but her reproaches were not without result. They evidently stood in some awe of Katerina Ivanovna. The lodgers, one after another, squeezed back into the doorway with that strange inner feeling of satisfaction which may be observed in the presence of a sudden accident, evening in those nearest and dearest to the victim, from which no living man is exempt, evening in spite of the sincerest sympathy and compassion. Voices outside were heard, however, speaking of the hospital and saying that they'd no business to make a disturbance here. "No business to die," cried Katerina Ivanovna, and she was rushing to the door to vent her wrath upon them, but in the doorway came face to face with Madame Lippevechsel, who had only just heard of the accident and ran in to restore order. She was a particularly quarrelsome and irresponsible German. "Ah, my God," she cried, clasping her hands, "your husband drunken horses have trampled. To the hospital with him. I am the landlady, Amalia Ludwigovna. I beg you to recollect what you are saying." Katerina Ivanovna began haughtily. She always took a haughty tone with the landlady that she may remember her place. An evening now could not deny herself this satisfaction. "Amalia Ludwigovna, I have you once before told that you to call me Amalia Ludwigovna may not dare. I am Amalia Ivanovna. You are not Amalia Ivanovna, but Amalia Ludwigovna, and as I'm not one of your despicable flatterers like Mr. Lebeziatnikov, who's laughing behind the door at this moment. A laugh and a cry of "they are at it again" was in fact audible at the door, so I shall always call you Amalia Ludwigovna, though I fail to understand why you dislike that name. You can see for yourself what has happened to Semyon Zaharovich. He is dying. I beg you to close that door at once and to admit no one. Let him at least die in peace. or I warn you the Governor-General himself shall be informed of your conduct tomorrow. The prince knew me as a girl. He remembers Semyon Zaharovich well and has often been a benefactor to him. Everyone knows that Semyon Zaharovich had many friends and protectors, whom he abandoned himself from an honorable pride, knowing his unhappy weakness. But now she pointed to Raskolnikov. A generous young man has come to our assistance, who has wealth and connections and whom Semyon Zaharovich has known from a child. You may rest assured, Amelia Ludwigovna. All this was uttered with extreme rapidity, getting quicker and quicker, but a cough suddenly cut short Katerina Ivanovna's eloquence. At that instant the dying man recovered consciousness and uttered a groan. She ran to him. The injured man opened his eyes, and without recognition or understanding gazed at Raskolnikov, who was bending over him. He drew deep, slow, painful breaths. Blood oozed at the corners of his mouth and drops of perspiration came out on his forehead. Not recognizing Raskolnikov, he began looking round uneasily. Katerina Ivanovna looked at him with a sad but stern face, and tears trickled from her eyes. "My God, his whole chest is crushed. How he is bleeding," she said in despair. "We must take off his clothes. Turn a little, Semyon Zaharovich, if you can," she cried to him. Marmeladov recognized her. "A priest," he articulated huskily. Katerina Ivanovna walked to the window, laid her head against the window frame, and exclaimed in despair, "Oh, cursed life! A priest," the dying man said again after a moment's silence. "They've gone for him." Katerina Ivanovna shouted to him. He obeyed her shout and was silent. With sad and timid eyes he looked for her. She returned and stood by his pillow. He seemed a little easier, but not for long. Soon his eyes rested on little Lida, his favorite, who was shaking in the corner, as though she were in a fit, and staring at him with her wondering childish eyes. "Ah," he signed towards her uneasily. He wanted to say something. "What now?" cried Katerina Ivanovna. "Barefoot, barefoot," he muttered, indicating with frenzied eyes the child's bare feet. "Be silent," Katerina Ivanovna cried irritably. "You know why she is barefooted." "Thank God, the doctor," exclaimed Raskolnikov, relieved. The doctor came in, a precise little old man, a German, looking about him mistrustfully. He went up to the sick man, took his pulse, carefully felt his head, and with the help of Katerina Ivanovna he unbuttoned the blood-stained shirt and bared the injured man's chest. It was gashed, crushed and fractured. Several ribs on the right side were broken. On the left side, just over the heart, was a large, sinister-looking yellowish-black bruise, a cruel kick from the horse's hoof. The doctor frowned. The policeman told him that he was caught in the wheel and turned round with it for 30 yards on the road. "It's wonderful that he has recovered consciousness," the doctor whispered softly to Raskolnikov. "What do you think of him?" he asked. "He will die immediately." "Is there really no hope?" "Not the faintest. He is at the last gasp. His head is badly injured. 2 I could bleed him if you like, but it would be useless. He is bound to die within the next 5 or 10 minutes. Better bleed him then, if you like, but I warn you it will be perfectly useless." At that moment other steps were heard. The crowd in the passage parted, and the priest, a little, grey old man, appeared in the doorway bearing the sacrament. A policeman had gone for him at the time of the accident. The doctor changed places with him, exchanging glances with him. Raskolnikov begged the doctor to remain a little while. He shrugged his shoulders and remained. All stepped back. The confession was soon over. The dying man probably understood little. He could only utter indistinct broken sounds. Katerina Ivanovna took little Lida, lifted the boy from the chair, knelt down in the corner by the stove, and made the children kneel in front of her. The little girl was still trembling, but the boy, kneeling on his little bare knees, lifted his hand rhythmically, crossing himself with precision, and bowed down, touching the floor with his forehead, which seemed to afford him especial satisfaction. Katerina Ivanovna bit her lips and held back her tears. She prayed, too, now and then, pulling straight the boy's shirt, and managed to cover the girl's bare shoulders with a kerchief, which she took from the chest without rising from her knees or ceasing to pray. Meanwhile, the door from the inner rooms was opened inquisitively again. In the passage, the crowd of spectators from all the flats on the staircase grew denser and denser, but they did not venture beyond the threshold. A single candle end lighted up the scene. At that moment, Polenka forced her way through the crowd at the door. She came in panting from running so fast, took off her kerchief, looked for her mother, went up to her and said, "She's coming. I met her in the street." Her mother made her kneel beside her. Timidly and noiselessly a young girl made her way through the crowd, and strange was her appearance in that room. In the amid of want, rags, death and despair. She, too, was in rags. Her attire was all of the cheapest, but decked out in gutter finery of a special stamp, unmistakably betraying its shameful purpose. Sonia stopped short in the doorway and looked about her bewildered, unconscious of everything. She forgot her fourth hand, gaudy silk dress, so unseemly here with its ridiculous long train, and her immense crinoline that filled up the whole doorway, and her light-colored shoes, and the parasol she brought with her, though it was no use at night, and the absurd round straw hat with its flaring flame-colored feather. Under this rakishly tilted hat was a pale, frightened little face with lips parted and eyes staring in terror. Sonia was a small, thin girl of 18 with fair hair, rather pretty, with wonderful blue eyes. She looked intently at the bed and the priest. She too was out of breath with running. At last whispers, some words in the crowd probably, reached her. She looked down and took a step forward into the room, still keeping close to the door. The service was over. Katerina Ivanovna went up to her husband again. The priest stepped back and turned to say a few words of admonition and consolation to Katerina Ivanovna on leaving. "What am I to do with these?" she interrupted sharply and irritably, pointing to the little ones. "God is merciful. Look to the Most High for succor," the priest began. He is merciful, but not to us." "That's a sin, madam," observed the priest, shaking his head. "And isn't that a sin?" cried Katerina Ivanovna, pointing to the dying man. "Perhaps those who have involuntarily caused the accident will agree to compensate you, at least for the loss of his earnings." "You don't understand," cried Katerina Ivanovna angrily waving her hand. "And why should they compensate me? Why, he was drunk and threw himself under the horses. What earnings? He brought us in nothing but misery. He drank everything away, the drunkard. He robbed us to get drink. He wasted their lives and mine for drink. And thank God he's dying. One less to keep. You must forgive in the hour of death. That's a sin, madam. Such feelings are a great sin." Katerina Ivanovna was busy with the dying man. She was giving him water, wiping the blood and sweat from his head, setting his pillow straight, and had only turned now and then for a moment to address the priest. Now she flew at him almost in a frenzy. "Ah, father, that's words and only words. Forgive. If he'd not been run over, he'd have come home today drunk and his only shirt dirty and in rags, and he'd have fallen asleep like a log, and I should have been sousing and rinsing till daybreak, washing his rags and the children's and then drying them by the window, and as soon as it was daylight I should have been darning them. That's how I spend my nights. What's the use of talking of forgiveness? I have forgiven as it is." A terrible hollow cough interrupted her words. She put her handkerchief to her lips and showed it to the priest, pressing her other hand to her aching chest. The handkerchief was covered with blood. The priest bowed his head and said nothing. Marmeladov was in the last agony. He did not take his eyes off the face of Katerina Ivanovna, who was bending over him again. He kept trying to say something to her. He began moving his tongue with difficulty and articulating indistinctly, but Katerina Ivanovna, understanding that he wanted to ask her forgiveness, called peremptorily to him, "Be silent. No need. I know what you want to say." And the sick man was silent, but at the same instant his wandering eyes strayed to the doorway, and he saw Sonia. Till then he had not noticed her. She was standing in the shadow in a corner. "Who's that? Who's that?" he said suddenly in a thick gasping voice, in agitation, turning his eyes in horror towards the door where his daughter was standing, and trying to sit up. "Lie down. Lie down. cried Katerina Ivanovna. With a natural strength he had succeeded in propping himself on his elbow. He looked wildly and fixedly for some time on his daughter, as though not recognizing her. He had never seen her before in such attire. Suddenly he recognized her, crushed and ashamed in her humiliation and gaudy finery, meekly awaiting her turn to say goodbye to her dying father. His face showed intense suffering. "Sonia, daughter, forgive," he cried, and he tried to hold out his hand to her, but losing his balance, he fell off the sofa, face downwards on the floor. They rushed to pick him up. They put him on the sofa, but he was dying. Sonia, with a faint cry, ran up, embraced him, and remained so without moving. He died in her arms. He's got what he wanted, Katerina Ivanovna cried, seeing her husband's dead body. "Well, what's to be done now? How am I to bury him? What can I give them to tomorrow to eat?" Raskolnikov went up to Katerina Ivanovna. "Katerina Ivanovna," he began, "last week your husband told me all his life and circumstances. Believe me, he spoke of you with passionate reverence. From that evening, when I learned how devoted he was to you all, and how he loved and respected you especially, Katerina Ivanovna, in spite of his unfortunate weakness, from that evening we became friends. Allow me now to do something to repay my debt to my dead friend. Here are 20 rubles, I think, and if that can be of any assistance to you, then in short, I will come again. I will be sure to come again. I shall, perhaps, come again to tomorrow. Goodbye." And he went quickly out of the room, squeezing his way through the crowd to the stairs. But in the crowd he suddenly jostled against Nikodem Fomitch, who had heard of the accident and had come to give instructions in person. They had not met since the scene at the police station, but Nikodem Fomitch knew him instantly. "Ah, is that you?" he asked him. "He's dead," answered Raskolnikov. "The doctor and the priest have been all as it should have been. Don't worry the poor woman too much. She is in consumption as it is. Try and cheer her up. If possible, you are a kind-hearted man. I know," he added with a smile, looking straight in his face. "But you are spattered with blood," observed Nikodem Fomitch, noticing in the lamplight some fresh stains on Raskolnikov's waistcoat. "Yes, I'm covered with blood," Raskolnikov said with a peculiar air. Then he smiled, nodded, and went downstairs. He walked down slowly and deliberately, feverish but not conscious of it, entirely absorbed in a new overwhelming sensation of life and strength that surged up suddenly within him. This sensation may be compared to that of a man condemned to death who has suddenly been pardoned. Halfway down the staircase he was overtaken by the priest on his way home. Raskolnikov let him pass, exchanging a silent greeting with him. He was just descending the last steps when he heard rapid footsteps behind him. Someone overtook him. It was Polenka. She was running after him, calling, "Wait, wait." He turned round. She was at the bottom of the staircase and stopped short a step above him. A dim light came in from the yard. Raskolnikov could distinguish the child's thin but pretty little face, looking at him with a bright childish smile. She had run after him with a message, which she was evidently glad to give. "Tell me, what is your name, and where do you live?" she said hurriedly in a breathless voice. He laid both hands on her shoulders and looked at her with a sort of rapture. It was such a joy to him to look at her. He could not have said why. "Who sent you?" "Sister Sonia sent me," answered the girl, smiling still more brightly. "I knew it was Sister Sonia sent you. Mamma sent me, too. When Sister Sonia was sending me, Mamma came up, too, and said, 'Run fast, Polenka.'" "Do you love Sister Sonia?" "I love her more than anyone," Polenka answered with a peculiar earnestness, and her smile became graver. "And will you love me?" By way of answer he saw the little girl's face approaching him, her full lips naively held out to kiss him. Suddenly her arms as thin as sticks held him tightly, her head rested on his shoulder, and the little girl wept softly, pressing her face against him. "I am sorry for father," she said a moment later, raising her tear-stained face and brushing away the tears with her hands. "It's nothing but misfortunes now," she added suddenly with that peculiarly sedate air which children try hard to assume when they want to speak like grown-up people. Did your father love you? He loved Lida most, she went on very seriously without a smile. Exactly like grown-up people, he loved her because she is little and because she is ill, too. And he always used to bring her presents. But he taught us to read and me grammar and scripture, too, she added with dignity. And mother never used to say anything, but we knew that she liked it and father knew it, too. And mother wants to teach me French, for it's time my education began. And do you know your prayers? Of course, we do. We knew them long ago. I say my prayers to myself as I am a big girl now, but Kalia and Lita say them aloud with mother. First they repeat the Ave Maria and then another prayer, Lord, forgive and bless Sister Sonia, and then another, Lord, forgive and bless our second father. For our elder father is dead and this is another one, but we do pray for the other as well. Polenka, my name is Rodion. Pray sometimes for me, too. And your servant Rodion. Nothing more. I'll pray for you all the rest of my life, the little girl declared hotly, and suddenly smiling again she rushed at him and hugged him warmly once more. Raskolnikov told her his name and address and promised to be sure to come next day. The child went away quite enchanted with him. It was past 10 when he came out into the street. In 5 minutes he was standing on the bridge at the spot where the woman had jumped in. Enough, he pronounced resolutely and triumphantly. I've done with fancies, imaginary terrors and phantoms. Life is real. Haven't I lived just now? My life has not yet died with that old woman. The kingdom of heaven to her. And now enough, madam. Leave me in peace. Now for the reign of reason and light and of will, and of strength, and now we will see. We will try our strength, he added defiantly, as though challenging some power of darkness. And I was ready to consent to live in a square of space. I am very weak at this moment, but I believe my illness is all over. I knew it would be over when I went out. By the way, Pochinkov's house is only a few steps away. I certainly must go to Razumihin evening. If it were not close by, let him win his bet. Let us give him some satisfaction, too. No matter. Strength. Strength is what one wants. You can get nothing without it. And strength must be won by strength. That's what they don't know, he added proudly and self-confidently, and he walked with flagging footsteps from the bridge. Pride and self-confidence grew continually stronger in him. He was becoming a different man every moment. What was it had happened to work this revolution in him? He did not know himself. Like a man catching at a straw, he suddenly felt that he, too, could live, that there was still life for him, that his life had not died with the old woman. Perhaps he was in too great a hurry with his conclusions, but he did not think of that. But I did ask her to remember your servant Rodion in her prayers. The idea struck him. Well, that was in case of emergency, he added, and laughed himself at his boyish sally. He was in the best of spirits. He easily found Razumihin. The new lodger was already known at Pochinkov's, and the porter at once showed him the way. Halfway upstairs he could hear the noise and animated conversation of a big gathering of people. The door was wide open on the stairs. He could hear exclamations and discussion. Razumihin's room was fairly large. The company consisted of 15 people. Raskolnikov stopped in the entry, where 2 of the landlady's servants were busy behind a screen with 2 samovars, bottles, plates and dishes of pie and savories brought up from the landlady's kitchen. Raskolnikov sent in for Razumihin. He ran out delighted. At the first glance it was apparent that he had had a great deal to drink, and, though no amount of liquor made Razumihin quite drunk, this time he was perceptibly affected by it. Listen, Raskolnikov hastened to say. I've only just come to tell you you've won your bet and that no one really knows what may not happen to him. I can't come in. I am so weak that I shall fall down directly. And so good evening and goodbye. Come and see me tomorrow. Do you know what? I'll see you home. If you say you're weak yourself, you must. And your visitors? Who is the curly-headed one who has just peeped out? He, goodness only knows. Some friend of uncle's. I expect, or perhaps he has come without being invited. I'll leave uncle with them. He is an invaluable person. Pity I can't introduce you to him now. But confound them all now. They won't notice me, and I need a little fresh air, for you've come just in the nick of time. Another 2 minutes and I should have come to blows. They are talking such a lot of wild stuff you simply can't imagine what men will say. Though why shouldn't you imagine? Don't we talk nonsense ourselves? And let them. That's the way to learn not to. Wait a minute. I'll fetch Zosimov. Zosimov pounced upon Raskolnikov almost greedily. He showed a special interest in him. Soon his face brightened. You must go to bed at once, he pronounced, examining the patient as far as he could, and take something for the night. Will you take it? I got it ready some time ago, a powder. Two, if you like, answered Raskolnikov. The powder was taken at once. It's a good thing you are taking him home, observed Zosimov to Razumihin. We shall see how he is tomorrow. Today he's not at all amiss. A considerable change since the afternoon. Live and learn. Do you know what Zosimov whispered to me when we were coming out? Razumihin blurted out, as soon as they were in the street. I won't tell you everything, brother, because they are such fools. Zosimov told me to talk freely to you on the way and get you to talk freely to me, and afterwards I am to tell him about it, for he's got a notion in his head that you are mad or close on it. Only fancy, in the first place, you've 3 times the brains he has. In the second, if you are not mad, you needn't care a hang that he has got such a wild idea. And thirdly, that piece of beef whose specialty is surgery has gone mad on mental diseases, and what's brought him to this conclusion about you was your conversation today with Zametov. Zametov told you all about it? Yes, and he did well. Now I understand what it all means, and so does Zametov. Well, the fact is, Radia, the point is I am a little drunk now, but that's no matter. The point is that this idea, you understand, was just being hatched in their brains, you understand? That is, no one ventured to say it aloud because the idea is too absurd, and especially since the arrest of that painter, that bubbles burst and gone forever. But why are they such fools? I gave Zametov a bit of a thrashing at the time. That's between ourselves, brother. Please don't let out a hint that you know of it. I've noticed he is a ticklish subject. It was at Luise Ivanovna's. But today it's all cleared up. That Ilya Petrovitch is at the bottom of it. He took advantage of your fainting at the police station, but he is ashamed of it himself now. I know that. Raskolnikov listened greedily. Razumihin was drunk enough to talk too freely. I fainted then because it was so close, and the smell of paint, said Raskolnikov. No need to explain that. And it wasn't the paint only. The fever had been coming on for a month. Zosimov testifies to that. But how crushed that boy is now, you wouldn't believe. I am not worth his little finger, he says. Yours, he means. He has good feelings at times, brother, but the lesson you gave him today in the Palais de Cristal, that was too good for anything. You frightened him at first, you know. He nearly went into convulsions. You almost convinced him again of the truth of all that hideous nonsense, and then you suddenly put out your tongue at him. There now. What do you make of it? It was perfect. He is crushed, annihilated now. It was masterly, by Jove, it's what they deserve. Ah, that I wasn't there. He was hoping to see you awfully. Poor Friary, too, wants to make your acquaintance. Ah, he too, but why did they put me down as mad? Oh, not mad. I must have said too much. Brother, what struck him, you see, was that only that subject seemed to interest you. Now it's clear why it did interest you. Knowing all the circumstances, and how that irritated you and worked in with your illness. I am a little drunk, brother, only, confound him, he has some idea of his own, I tell you. He's mad on mental diseases. But don't you mind him for half a minute. Both were silent. Listen, Razumihin, began Raskolnikov. I want to tell you plainly. I've just been at a deathbed. A clerk who died, I gave them all my money, and besides I've just been kissed by someone who, if I had killed anyone, would just the same. In fact, I saw someone else there with a flame-colored feather. But I am talking nonsense. I am very weak. Support me, we shall be at the stairs directly. What's the matter? What's the matter with you? Razumihin asked anxiously. I am a little giddy, but that's not the point. I am so sad like a woman. Look, what's that? Look, look, what is it? Don't you see? A light in my room, you see. Through the crack they were already at the foot of the last flight of stairs, at the level of the landlady's door, and they could, as a fact, see from below that there was a light in Raskolnikov's garret. Queer. Nastasia, perhaps, observed Razumihin. She is never in my room at this time, and she must be in bed long ago. But I don't care. Goodbye. What do you mean? I am coming with you. We'll come in together. I know we are going in together, but I want to shake hands here and say goodbye to you here. So give me your hand. Goodbye. What's the matter with you, Radia? Nothing, come along, you shall be witness. They began mounting the stairs, and the idea struck Razumihin that perhaps Sosimov may be right after all. Ah, I've upset him with my chatter, he muttered to himself. When they reached the door they heard voices in the room. What is it? Cried Razumihin. Raskolnikov was the first to open the door. He flung it wide and stood still in the doorway, dumbfounded. His mother and sister were sitting on his sofa and had been waiting an hour and a half for him. Why had he never expected, never thought of them, though the news that they had started, were on their way and would arrive immediately, had been repeated to him only that day? They had spent that hour and a half plying Nastasia with questions. She was standing before them and had told them everything by now. They were beside themselves with alarm when they heard of his running away today, ill and, as they understood from her story, delirious. Good heavens, what had become of him? Both had been weeping, both had been in anguish for that hour and a half. A cry of joy, of ecstasy, greeted Raskolnikov's entrance. Both rushed to him, but he stood like one dead. A sudden intolerable sensation struck him like a thunderbolt. He did not lift his arms to embrace them. He could not. His mother and sister clasped him in their arms, kissed him, laughed and cried. He took a step, tottered and fell to the ground, fainting. Anxiety, cries of horror, moans. Razumihin, who was standing in the doorway, flew into the room, seized the sick man in his strong arms and in a moment had him on the sofa. It's nothing, nothing, he cried to the mother and sister. It's only a faint, a mere trifle. Only just now the doctor said he was much better, that he is perfectly well. Water. See, he is coming to himself. He is all right again. And seizing Downia by the arm so that he almost dislocated it, he made her bend down to see that he is all right again. The mother and sister looked on him with emotion and gratitude as their providence. Chapter 15. Raskolnikov got up and sat down on the sofa. He waved his hand weakly to Razumihin to cut short the flow of warm and incoherent consolations he was addressing to his mother and sister, took them both by the hand and for a minute or two gazed from one to the other without speaking. His mother was alarmed by his expression. It revealed an emotion agonizingly poignant and at the same time something immovable, almost insane. Pulcheria Alexandrovna began to cry. Avdotya Romanovna was pale, her hand trembled in her brother's. Go home with him, he said in a broken voice, pointing to Razumihin. Goodbye till tomorrow. To tomorrow everything. Is it long since you arrived? This evening, Radia, answered Pulcheria Alexandrovna. The train was awfully late. But, Radia, nothing would induce me to leave you now. I will spend the night here, near you. Don't torture me, he said with a gesture of irritation. I will stay with him, cried Razumihin. I won't leave him for a moment. Bother all my visitors. Let them rage to their heart's content. My uncle is presiding there. How can I thank you? Pulcheria Alexandrovna was beginning, once more pressing Razumihin's hands, but Raskolnikov interrupted her again. I can't of it, he repeated irritably. Don't worry me. Enough. Go away, I can't stand it. Come, mamma, come out of the room at least for a minute. Downia whispered in dismay. We are distressing him, that's evident. Mayn't I look at him after 3 years? Wept Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Say, he stopped them again. You keep interrupting me. and my ideas get muddled. Have you seen Lushin? No, Radia. But he knows already of our arrival. We have heard, Radia, that Pyotr Petrovitch was so kind as to visit you today, Pulcheria Alexandrovna added somewhat timidly. Yes, he was so kind, Downia. I promised Lushin I'd throw him downstairs and told him to go to hell. Radia, what are you saying? Surely, you don't mean to tell us, Pulcheria Alexandrovna began in alarm. But she stopped, looking at Downia. Avdotya Romanovna was looking attentively at her brother, waiting for what would come next. Both of them had heard of the quarrel from Nastasia, so far as she had succeeded in understanding and reporting it, and were in painful perplexity and suspense. Downia, Raskolnikov continued with an effort, I don't want that marriage. So at the first opportunity tomorrow you must refuse Lushin, so that we may never hear his name again. Good heavens, cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Brother, think what you are saying. Avdotya Romanovna began impetuously, but immediately checked herself. You are not fit to talk now, perhaps. You are tired, she added gently. You think I am delirious? No, you are marrying Lushin for my sake, but I won't accept the sacrifice. And so write a letter before tomorrow to refuse him. Let me read it in the morning and that will be the end of it. That I can't do, the girl cried, offended. What right have you, Downia? You are hasty, too. Be quiet. Tomorrow, don't you see, the mother interposed in dismay. Better come away. He is raving, Razumihin cried tipsily, or how would he dare? Tomorrow all this nonsense will be over. Today he certainly did drive him away. That was so, and Lushin got angry, too. He made speeches here, wanted to show off his learning, and he went out crestfallen. Then it's true, cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Goodbye till tomorrow, brother, said Downia compassionately. Let us go, mother. Goodbye, Radia. Do you hear, sister? He repeated after them, making a last effort. I'm not delirious. This marriage is an infamy. Let me act like a scoundrel. But you mustn't, one is enough. And though I'm a scoundrel, I wouldn't own such a sister. It's me or Lushin. Go now. But you're out of your mind. Despot, roared Razumihin. But Raskolnikov did not and perhaps could not answer. He lay down on the sofa and turned to the wall, utterly exhausted. Avdotya Romanovna looked with interest at Razumihin. Her black eyes flashed. Razumihin positively started at her glance. Pulcheria Alexandrovna stood overwhelmed. Nothing would induce me to go, she whispered in despair to Razumihin. I will stay somewhere here. Escort Downia home. You'll spoil everything, Razumihin answered in the same whisper, losing patience. Come out onto the stairs. Anyway, Nastasia, show a light. I assure you, he went on in a half-whisper on the stairs, that he was almost beating the doctor and me this afternoon. Do you understand? The doctor himself. Evening he gave way and left him, so as not to irritate him. I remained downstairs on guard, but he dressed at once and slipped off. And he will slip off again if you irritate him, at this time of night, and will do himself some mischief. What are you saying? And Avdotya Romanovna can't possibly be left in those lodgings without you. Just think where you are staying. That blackguard Pyotr Petrovitch couldn't find you better lodgings, but you know I've had a little to drink, and that's what makes me swear. Don't mind it, but I'll go to the landlady here. Pulcheria Alexandrovna insisted. I'll beseech her to find some corner for Downia and me for the night. I can't leave him like that. I cannot. This conversation took place on the landing just before the landlady's door. Nastasia lighted them from a step below. Razumihin was in extraordinary excitement. Half an hour earlier, while he was bringing Raskolnikov home, he had truly talked too freely, but he was aware of it himself, and his head was clear in spite of the vast quantities he had imbibed. Now he was in a state bordering on ecstasy, and all that he had drunk seemed to fly to his head with redoubled effect. He stood with the two ladies, seizing both by their hands, persuading them, and giving them reasons with astonishing plainness of speech, and at almost every word he uttered, probably to emphasize his arguments, he squeezed their hands painfully as in a vise. He stared at Avdotya Romanovna without the least regard for good manners. They sometimes pulled their hands out of his huge bony paws, but far from noticing what was the matter, he drew them all the closer to him. If they'd told him to jump head foremost from the staircase, he would have done it without thought or hesitation in their service. Though Pulcheria Alexandrovna felt that the young man was really too eccentric and pinched her hand too much, in her anxiety over her Radia she looked on his presence as providential, and was unwilling to notice all his peculiarities. But though Avdiya Romanovna shared her anxiety, and was not of timorous disposition, she could not see the glowing light in his eyes without wonder and almost alarm. It was only the unbounded confidence inspired by Nastasia's account of her brother's queer friend, which prevented her from trying to run away from him, and to persuade her mother to do the same. She realized, too, that evening running away was perhaps impossible now. 10 minutes later, however, she was considerably reassured. It was characteristic of Razumihin that he showed his true nature at once, whatever mood he may be in, so that people quickly saw the sort of man they had to deal with. "You can't go to the landlady, that's perfect nonsense," he cried. "If you stay, though you are his mother, you'll drive him to a frenzy, and then goodness knows what will happen. Listen, I'll tell you what I'll do. Nastasia will stay with him now, and I'll conduct you both home. You can't be in the streets alone. Petersburg is an awful place in that way, but no matter. Then I'll run straight back here, and a quarter of an hour later, on my word of honor, I'll bring you news how he is, whether he is asleep, and all that. Then, listen, then I'll run home in a twinkling. I've a lot of friends there, all drunk. I'll fetch Zosimov. That's the doctor who is looking after him. He is there, too. But he is not drunk. He is not drunk. He is never drunk. I'll drag him to Radia, and then to you, so that you'll get 2 reports in the hour, from the doctor, you understand, from the doctor himself. That's a very different thing from my account of him. If there's anything wrong, I swear I'll bring you here myself, but if it's all right, you go to bed. And I'll spend the night here, in the passage. He won't hear me, and I'll tell Zosimov to sleep at the landlady's, to be a hand. Which is better for him? You are the doctor? So come home then. But the landlady is out of the question. It's all right for me, but it's out of the question for you. She wouldn't take you, for she's a fool. She'd be jealous on my account of Avdiya Romanovna, and of you, too. If you want to know of Avdiya Romanovna, certainly. She is an absolutely unaccountable character. But I'm a fool, too. No matter. Come along. Do you trust me? Come. Do you trust me or not? Let us go, mother, said Avdiya Romanovna. He will certainly do what he has promised. He has saved Radia already, and if the doctor really will consent to spend the night here, what could be better? You see, you understand me, because you are an angel. Razumihin cried in ecstasy. Let us go. Nastasia, fly upstairs and sit with him with a light. I'll come in a quarter of an hour. Though Pulcheria Alexandrovna was not perfectly convinced, she made no further resistance. Razumihin gave an arm to each and drew them down the stairs. He still made her uneasy, as though he was competent and good-natured. Was he capable of carrying out his promise? He seemed in such a condition. Ah, I see you think I am in such a condition. Razumihin broke in upon her thoughts, guessing them, as he strolled along the pavement with huge steps, so that the 2 ladies could hardly keep up with him, a fact he did not observe, however. Nonsense. That is, I am drunk like a fool, but that's not it. I am not drunk from wine. It's seeing you has turned my head, but don't mind me. Don't take any notice. I am talking nonsense. I am not worthy of you. I am utterly unworthy of you. The minute I've taken you home, I'll pour a couple of pailfuls of water over my head in the gutter here, and then I shall be all right. If only you knew how I love you both. Don't laugh, and don't be angry. You may be angry with anyone, but not with me. I'm his friend, and therefore I'm your friend, too. I want to be. I had a presentiment last year. There was a moment, though it wasn't a presentiment really, for you seem to have fallen from heaven. And I expect I shan't sleep all night. Zosimov was afraid a little time ago that he would go mad. That's why he mustn't be irritated. What do you say? Cried the mother. Did the doctor really say that? asked Avdotya Romanovna, alarmed. Yes, but it's not so, not a bit of it. He gave him some medicine, a powder, I saw it. And then you're coming here. Ah, it would have been better if you had come to tomorrow. It's a good thing we went away. And in an hour Zosimov himself will report to you about everything. He is not drunk, and I shan't be drunk. And what made me get so tight? Because they got me into an argument. Damn them. I've sworn never to argue. They talk such trash. I almost came to blows. I've left my uncle to preside. Would you believe? They insist on complete absence of individualism, and that's just what they relish. Not to be themselves, to be as unlike themselves as they can. That's what they regard as the highest point of progress. If only their nonsense were their own. But as it is, listen, Pulcheria Alexandrovna interrupted timidly, but it only added fuel to the flames. What do you think? Shouted Razumihin, louder than ever. You think I am attacking them for talking nonsense? Not a bit. I like them to talk nonsense. That's man's one privilege over all creation. Through error you come to the truth. I'm a man because I err. You never reach any truth without making 14 mistakes, and very likely 114. And a fine thing, too, in its way. But we can't even make mistakes on our own account. Talk nonsense, but talk your own nonsense, and I'll kiss you for it. To go wrong in one's own way is better than to go right in someone else's. In the first case you are a man, in the second you're no better than a bird. Truth won't escape you, but life can be cramped. There have been examples. And what are we doing now? In science, development, thought, invention, ideals, aims, liberalism, judgment, experience, and everything, we are still in the preparatory class at school. We prefer to live on other people's ideas. It's what we are used to. Am I right? Am I right? Cried Razumihin, pressing and shaking the two ladies' hands. Oh, mercy, I do not know, cried poor Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Yes, yes, though I don't agree with you in everything, added Avdotya Romanovna earnestly, and at once uttered a cry, for he squeezed her hand so painfully. Yes, you say yes, well, after that you, he cried in a transport. You are a fount of goodness, purity, sense and perfection. Give me your hand, you give me yours, too. I want to kiss your hands here at once, on my knees, and he fell on his knees on the pavement, fortunately at that time deserted. Leave off, I entreat you. What are you doing? Pulcheria Alexandrovna cried, greatly distressed. Get up, said Downia laughing, though she, too, was upset. Not for anything till you let me kiss your hands. That's it. Enough. I get up and we'll go on. I am a luckless fool. I am unworthy of you and drunk, and I am ashamed. I am not worthy to love you. But to do homage to you is the duty of every man who is not a perfect beast. And I've done homage. Here are your lodgings, and for that alone Radia was right in driving your Pyotr Petrovitch away. How dare he? How dare he put you in such lodgings? It's a scandal. Do you know the sort of people they take in here? And you his betrothed. You are his betrothed? Yes. Well, then, I'll tell you, your fiancé is a scoundrel. Excuse me, Mr. Razumihin, you are forgetting. Pulcheria Alexandrovna was beginning. Yes, you are right. I did forget myself. I am ashamed of it. Razumihin made haste to apologize. But you can't be angry with me for speaking so, for I speak sincerely and not because HM, that would be disgraceful. In fact, not because I'm in HM. Well, anyway, I won't say why, I daren't, but we all saw today when he came in that man is not of our sort. Not because he had his hair curled at the barber's, not because he was in such a hurry to show his wit, but because he is a spy, a speculator, because he is a skinflint and a buffoon. That's evident. Do you think him clever? No, he is a fool, a fool. And is he a match for you? Good heavens. Do you see, ladies? He stopped suddenly on the way upstairs to their rooms. Though all my friends there are drunk, yet they are all honest. And though we do talk a lot of trash, and I do, too, yet we shall talk our way to the truth at last, for we are on the right path, while Pyotr Petrovitch is not on the right path. Though I've been calling them all sorts of names just now, I do respect them although I don't respect Zametov. I like him, for he is a puppy, and that bullock Zosimov, because he is an honest man and knows his work. But enough, it's all said and forgiven. Is it forgiven? Well, then, let's go on. I know this corridor, I've been here. There was a scandal here at number 3. Where are you here? Which number? 8. Well, lock yourselves in for the night, then. Don't let anybody in. In a quarter of an hour I'll come back with news, and half an hour later I'll bring Zosimov. You'll see. Goodbye, I'll run. Good heavens, Downia, what is going to happen? Said Pulcheria Alexandrovna, addressing her daughter with anxiety and dismay. Don't worry yourself, mother, said Downia, taking off her hat and cape. God has sent this gentleman to our aid, though he has come from a drinking party. We can depend on him, I assure you, and all that he has done for Radia. Ah, Downia, goodness knows whether he will come. How could I bring myself to leave Radia? And how different I had fancied our meeting. How sullen he was, as though not pleased to see us. Tears came into her eyes. No, it's not that, mother. You didn't see. You were crying all the time. He is quite unhinged by serious illness. That's the reason. Ah, that illness. What will happen? What will happen? And how he talked to you. Downia, said the mother, looking timidly at her daughter, trying to read her thoughts, and already half consoled by Downia's standing up for her brother, which meant that she had already forgiven him. I am sure he will think better of it tomorrow, she added, probing her further. And I am sure that he will say the same tomorrow about that, Avdotya Romanovna said finally. And, of course, there was no going beyond that, for this was a point which Pulcheria Alexandrovna was afraid to discuss. Downia went up and kissed her mother. The latter warmly embraced her without speaking. Then she sat down to wait anxiously for Razumihin's return, timidly watching her daughter, who walked up and down the room with her arms folded, lost in thought. This walking up and down, when she was thinking, was a habit of Avdotya Romanovna's, and the mother was always afraid to break in on her daughter's mood at such moments. Razumihin, of course, was ridiculous in his sudden drunken infatuation for Avdotya Romanovna. Yet apart from his eccentric condition, many people would have thought it justified if they had seen Avdotya Romanovna, especially at that moment when she was walking to and fro with folded arms, pensive and melancholy. Avdotya Romanovna was remarkably good-looking. She was tall, strikingly well-proportioned, strong, and self-reliant. The latter quality was apparent in every gesture, though it did not in the least detract from the grace and softness of her movements. In face she resembled her brother, but she may be described as really beautiful. Her hair was dark brown, a little lighter than her brother's. There was a proud light in her almost black eyes, and yet at times a look of extraordinary kindness. She was pale, but it was a healthy pallor. Her face was radiant with freshness and vigor. Her mouth was rather small, the full red lower lip projected a little, as did her chin. It was the only irregularity in her beautiful face, but it gave it a peculiarly individual and almost haughty expression. Her face was always more serious and thoughtful than gay, but how well smiles, how well youthful, light-hearted, irresponsible laughter suited her face. It was natural enough that a warm, open, simple-hearted, honest giant like Razumihin, who had never seen anyone like her and was not quite sober at the time, should lose his head immediately. Besides, as chance would have it, he saw Downia for the first time transfigured by her love for her brother and her joy at meeting him. Afterwards he saw her lower lip quiver with indignation at her brother's insolent, cruel, and ungrateful words, and his fate was sealed. He had spoken the truth, moreover, when he blurted out in his drunken talk on the stairs that Praskovia Pavlovna, Raskolnikov's eccentric landlady, would be jealous of Pulcheria Alexandrovna as well as of Avdotya Romanovna on his account. Although Pulcheria Alexandrovna was 43, her face still retained traces of her former beauty. She looked much younger than her age, truly, which is almost always the case with women who retain serenity of spirit, sensitiveness, and pure sincere warmth of heart to old age. We may add in parenthesis that to preserve all this is the only means of retaining beauty to old age. Her hair had begun to grow gray and thin. There had long been little crow's foot wrinkles round her eyes, her cheeks were hollow and sunken from anxiety and grief. And yet it was a handsome face. She was downy over again, 20 years older, but without the projecting underlip. Pulcheria Alexandrovna was emotional, but not sentimental, timid and yielding, but only to a certain point. She could give way and accept a great deal even of what was contrary to her convictions, but there was a certain barrier fixed by honesty, principle and the deepest convictions which nothing would induce her to cross. Exactly 20 minutes after Razumihin's departure, there came two subdued but hurried knocks at the door. He had come back. "I won't come in, I haven't time," he hastened to say when the door was opened. "He sleeps like a top, soundly, quietly, and God grant he may sleep 10 hours. Nastasa's with him. I told her not to leave till I came. Now I'm fetching Zosimov. He will report to you and then you'd better turn in. I can see you are too tired to do anything," and he ran off down the corridor. "What a very competent and devoted young man!" cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna, exceedingly delighted. "He seems a splendid person," Avdotya Romanovna replied with some warmth, resuming her walk up and down the room. It was nearly an hour later, when they heard footsteps in the corridor and another knock at the door. Both women waited this time, completely relying on Razumihin's promise. He actually had succeeded in bringing Zosimov. Zosimov had agreed at once to desert the drinking party to go to Raskolnikov's, but he came reluctantly and with the greatest suspicion to see the ladies, mistrusting Razumihin in his exhilarated condition. But his vanity was at once reassured and flattered. He saw that they were really expecting him as an oracle. He stayed just 10 minutes, and succeeded in completely convincing and comforting Pulcheria Alexandrovna. He spoke with marked sympathy, but with a reserve and extreme seriousness of a young doctor at an important consultation. He did not utter a word on any other subject, and did not display the slightest desire to enter into more personal relations with the two ladies. Remarking at his first entrance the dazzling beauty of Avdotya Romanovna, he endeavored not to notice her at all during his visit, and addressed himself solely to Pulcheria Alexandrovna. All this gave him extraordinary inward satisfaction. He declared that he thought the invalid at this moment going on very satisfactorily. According to his observations, the patient's illness was due partly to his unfortunate material surroundings during the last few months, but it had partly also a moral origin, was, so to speak, the product of several material and moral influences, anxieties, apprehensions, troubles, certain ideas, and so on. Noticing stealthily that Avdotya Romanovna was following his words with close attention, Zosimov allowed himself to enlarge on this theme. On Pulcheria Alexandrovna's anxiously and timidly inquiring as to some suspicion of insanity, he replied with a composed and candid smile that his words had been exaggerated, that certainly the patient had some fixed idea, something approaching a monomania. Zosimov was now particularly studying this interesting branch of medicine, but that it must be recollected that until today the patient had been in delirium and that no doubt the presence of his family would have a favorable effect on his recovery and distract his mind, if only all fresh shocks can be avoided, he added significantly. Then he got up, took leave with an impressive and affable bow, while blessings, warm gratitude, and entreaties were showered upon him, and Avdotya Romanovna spontaneously offered her hand to him. He went out exceedingly pleased with his visit, and still more so with himself. "We'll talk tomorrow. Go to bed at once," Razumihin said in conclusion, following Zosimov out. "I'll be with you tomorrow morning as early as possible with my report." "That's a fetching little girl, Avdotya Romanovna," remarked Zosimov, almost licking his lips as they both came out into the street. "Fetching? You said fetching?" roared Razumihin, and he flew at Zosimov and seized him by the throat. "If you ever dare, do you understand? Do you understand?" he shouted, shaking him by the collar and squeezing him against the wall. "Do you hear? Let me go, you drunken devil," said Zosimov, struggling, and when he had let him go, he stared at him and went off into a sudden guffaw. Razumihin stood facing him in gloomy and earnest reflection. Of course, I am an ass, he observed, somber as a storm cloud, but still, you are another. No, brother, not at all such another. I am not dreaming of any folly. They walked along in silence, and only when they were close to Raskolnikov's lodgings, Razumihin broke the silence in considerable anxiety. Listen, he said, you're a first-rate fellow, but among your other failings, you're a loose fish, that I know, and a dirty one, too. You are a feeble, nervous wretch, and a mass of whims. You're getting fat and lazy and can't deny yourself anything, and I call that dirty because it leads one straight into the dirt. You've let yourself get so slack that I don't know how it is you are still a good evening a devoted doctor. You, a doctor, sleep on a feather bed and get up at night to your patients. In another 3 or 4 years you won't get up for your patients, but hang it all, that's not the point. You are going to spend tonight in the landlady's flat here. Hard work I've had to persuade her. And I'll be in the kitchen, so here's a chance for you to get to know her better. It's not as you think. There's not a trace of anything of the sort, brother. But I don't think. Here you have modesty, brother, silence, bashfulness, a savage virtue, and yet she's sighing and melting like wax, simply melting. Save me from her. By all that's unholy, she's most prepossessing. I'll repay you. I'll do anything. Zossimov laughed more violently than ever. Well, you are smitten. But what am I to do with her? It won't be much trouble, I assure you. Talk any rot you like to her, as long as you sit by her and talk. You're a doctor, too. Try curing her of something. I swear you won't regret it. She has a piano, and you know, I strum a little. I have a song there, a genuine Russian one. I shed hot tears. She likes the genuine article, and well, it all began with that song. Now you're a regular performer, a Matter, a Rubinstein, I assure you. You won't regret it. But have you made her some promise? Something signed? A promise of marriage, perhaps? Nothing, nothing, absolutely nothing of the kind. Besides, she is not that sort at all. Chebarov tried that. Well then, drop her. But I can't drop her like that. Why can't you? Well, I can't. That's all about it. There's an element of attraction here, brother. Then why have you fascinated her? I haven't fascinated her. Perhaps I was fascinated myself in my folly. But she won't care a straw whether it's you or I, so long as somebody sits beside her. Sighing, I can't explain the position, brother. Look here, you are good at mathematics, and working at it now. Begin teaching her the integral calculus. Upon my soul, I'm not joking, I'm in earnest. It'll be just the same to her. She will gaze at you and sigh for a whole year together. I talked to her once for 2 days at a time about the Prussian House of Lords, for one must talk of something. She just sighed and perspired. And you mustn't talk of love. She's bashful to hysterics, but just let her see you can't tear yourself away. That's enough. It's fearfully comfortable. You're quite at home. You can read, sit, lie about, write. You may evening venture on a kiss, if you're careful. But what do I want with her? I can't make you understand. You see, you are made for each other. I have often been reminded of you. You'll come to it in the end, so does it matter whether it's sooner or later? There's the feather-bed element here, brother, and not only that. There's an attraction here. Here you have the end of the world, an anchorage, a quiet haven, the navel of the earth, the 3 fishes that are the foundation of the world, the essence of pancakes, of savory fish pies, of the evening samovar, of soft sighs and warm shawls, and hot stoves to sleep on, as snug as though you were dead, and yet you're alive. The advantages of both at once. Well, hang it, brother, what stuff I'm talking. It's bedtime. Listen, I sometimes wake up at night, so I'll go in and look at him. But there's no need, it's all right. Don't you worry yourself, yet if you like, you may just look in once, too. But if you notice anything, delirium or fever, wake me at once. Chapter 16. Razumihin waked up next morning at 8 o'clock, troubled and serious. He found himself confronted with many new and unlooked-for perplexities. He had never expected that he would ever wake up feeling like that. He remembered every detail of the previous day, and he knew that a perfectly novel experience had befallen him, that he had received an impression unlike anything he had known before. At the same time, he recognized clearly that the dream which had fired his imagination was hopelessly unattainable, so unattainable that he felt positively ashamed of it, and he hastened to pass to the other more practical cares and difficulties bequeathed him by that thrice accursed yesterday. The most awful recollection of the previous day was the way he had shown himself base and mean, not only because he had been drunk, but because he had taken advantage of the young girl's position to abuse her fiancé in his stupid jealousy, knowing nothing of their mutual relations and obligations and next to nothing of the man himself. And what right had he to criticize him in that hasty and unguarded manner? Who had asked for his opinion? Was it thinkable that such a creature as Avdotya Romanovna would be marrying an unworthy man for money? So there must be something in him. The lodgings? But after all, how could he know the character of the lodgings? He was furnishing the flat foo. How despicable it all was! And what justification was it that he was drunk? Such a stupid excuse was even more degrading. In wine is truth, and the truth had all come out. That is, all the uncleanness of his coarse and envious heart. And would such a dream ever be permissible to him, Razumihin? What was he besides such a girl, he, the drunken noisy braggart of last night? Was it possible to imagine so absurd and cynical a juxtaposition? Razumihin blushed desperately at the very idea, and suddenly the recollection forced itself vividly upon him of how he had said last night on the stairs that the landlady would be jealous of Avdotya Romanovna. That was simply intolerable. He brought his fist down heavily on the kitchen stove, hurt his hand, and sent one of the bricks flying. Of course, he muttered to himself a minute later with a feeling of self-abasement, of course. All these infamies can never be wiped out or smoothed over, and so it's useless evening to think of it. And I must go to them in silence and do my duty in silence, too, and not ask forgiveness, and say nothing. For all is lost now. And yet, as he dressed, he examined his attire more carefully than usual. He hadn't another suit. If he had had, perhaps he wouldn't have put it on. I would have made a point of not putting it on. But in any case, he could not remain a cynic and a dirty sloven. He had no right to offend the feelings of others, especially when they were in need of his assistance and asking him to see them. He brushed his clothes carefully. His linen was always decent. In that respect he was especially clean. He washed that morning scrupulously. He got some soap from Nastasia. He washed his hair, his neck, and especially his hands. When it came to the question whether to shave his stubbly chin or not, Praskovia Pavlovna had capital razors that had been left by her late husband. The question was angrily answered in the negative. Let it stay as it is. What if they think that I shaved on purpose too? They certainly would think so. Not on any account. And the worst of it was he was so coarse, so dirty. He had the manners of a pothouse. And an evening, admitting that he knew he had some of the essentials of a gentleman, what was there in that to be proud of? Everyone ought to be a gentleman, and more than that, and all the same he remembered he, too, had done little things, not exactly dishonest, and yet, and what thoughts he sometimes had! HMN to set all that beside Avdotya Romanovna. Confound it, so be it. Well, he'd make a point then of being dirty, greasy, pothouse in his manners, and he wouldn't care. He'd be worse. He was engaged in such monologues when Zossimov, who had spent the night in Praskovia Pavlovna's parlor, came in. He was going home, and was in a hurry to look at the invalid first. Razumihin informed him that Raskolnikov was sleeping like a dormouse. Zossimov gave orders that they shouldn't wake him and promised to see him again about 11. If he is still at home, he added. Damn it all, if one can't control one's patients, how is one to cure them? Do you know whether he will go to them, or whether they are coming here? They are coming, I think, said Razumihin, understanding the object of the question, and they will discuss their family affairs, no doubt. I'll be off. You, as the doctor, have more right to be here than I. but I am not a father confessor. I shall come and go away. I've plenty to do besides looking after them. One thing worries me, interposed Razumihin, frowning. On the way home I talked a lot of drunken nonsense to him, all sorts of things, and amongst them that you were afraid that he may become insane. You told the ladies so, too. I know it was stupid. You may beat me if you like. Did you think so seriously? That's nonsense, I tell you. How could I think it seriously? You, yourself, described him as a monomaniac when you fetched me to him, and we added fuel to the fire yesterday. You did. That is, with your story about the painter. It was a nice conversation, when he was perhaps mad on that very point. If only I'd known what happened then at the police station and that some wretch had insulted him with this suspicion, HMI would not have allowed that conversation yesterday. These monomaniacs will make a mountain out of a molehill and see their fancies as solid realities. As far as I remember, it was Zamitov's story that cleared up half the mystery, to my mind. Why, I know one case in which a hypochondriac, a man of 40, cut the throat of a little boy of 8 because he couldn't endure the jokes he made every day at table. And in this case his rags, the insolent police officer, the fever and the suspicion, all that working upon a man half frantic with hypochondria, and with his morbid exceptional vanity, that may well have been the starting point of illness. Well, bother it all. And, by the way, that Zamitov certainly is a nice fellow, but he shouldn't have told all that last night. He is an awful chatterbox. But whom did he tell it to? You and me? And poor Fiery. What does that matter? And, by the way, have you any influence on them, his mother and sister? Tell them to be more careful with him today. They'll get on all right, Razumihin answered reluctantly. Why is he so set against this Luzhin? A man with money, and she doesn't seem to dislike him. And they haven't a farthing, I suppose. Eh? But what business is it of yours? Razumihin cried with annoyance. How can I tell whether they've a farthing? Ask them yourself, and perhaps you'll find out. Phew, what an ass you are sometimes. Last night's wine has not gone off yet. Goodbye. Thank your Praskovia Pavlovna from me for my night's lodging. She locked herself in, made no reply to my bonjour through the door. She was up at 7 o'clock. The samovar was taken into her from the kitchen. I was not vouchsafed a personal interview at 9 o'clock precisely. Razumihin reached the lodgings at Bakilyev's house. Both ladies were waiting for him with nervous impatience. They had risen at 7 o'clock or earlier. He entered looking as black as night, bowed awkwardly, and was at once furious with himself for it. He had reckoned without his host. Pulcheria Alexandrovna fairly rushed at him, seized him by both hands, and was almost kissing them. He glanced timidly at Avdotya Romanovna, but her proud countenance wore at that moment an expression of such gratitude and friendliness, such complete and unlooked for respect in place of the sneering looks and ill-disguised contempt he had expected, that it threw him into greater confusion than if he had been met with abuse. Fortunately, there was a subject for conversation, and he made haste to snatch at it. Hearing that everything was going well and that Radia had not yet waked, Pulcheria Alexandrovna declared that she was glad to hear it, because she had something which it was very, very necessary to talk over beforehand. Then followed an inquiry about breakfast, and an invitation to have it with them. They had waited to have it with him. Avdotya Romanovna rang the bell. It was answered by a ragged, dirty waiter, and they asked him to bring tea, which was served at last, but in such a dirty and disorderly way that the ladies were ashamed. Razumihin vigorously attacked the lodgings, but, remembering Luzhin, stopped in embarrassment and was greatly relieved by Pulcheria Alexandrovna's questions, which showered in a continual stream upon him. He talked for 3/4 of an hour, being constantly interrupted by their questions, and succeeded in describing to them all the most important facts he knew of the last year of Raskolnikov's life, concluding with a circumstantial account of his illness. He omitted, however, many things which were better omitted, including the scene at the police station with all its consequences. They listened eagerly to his story, and, when he thought he had finished and satisfied his listeners, he found that they considered he had hardly begun. Tell me, what do you think? Excuse me, I still don't know your name, Pulcheria Alexandrovna put in hastily. Dmitri Prokofitch. I should like very, very much to know Dmitri Prokofitch how he looks on things in general now. That is, how can I explain? What are his likes and dislikes? Is he always so irritable? Tell me, if you can, what are his hopes and, so to say, his dreams? Under what influences is he now? In a word, I should like— Ah, mother, how can he answer all that at once? Observed Downia. Good heavens! I had not expected to find him in the least like this. Dmitri Prokofitch. Naturally, answered Razumihin. I have no mother, but my uncle comes every year, and almost every time he can scarcely recognize me, evening in appearance, though he is a clever man, and your 3 years' separation means a great deal. What am I to tell you? I have known Rodion for a year and a half. He is morose, gloomy, proud and haughty, and of late, and perhaps for a long time before, he has been suspicious and fanciful. He has a noble nature and a kind heart. He does not like showing his feelings and would rather do a cruel thing than open his heart freely. Sometimes, though, he is not at all morbid, but simply cold and inhumanly callous. It's as though he were alternating between two characters. Sometimes he is fearfully reserved. He says he is so busy that everything is a hindrance, and yet he lies in bed doing nothing. He doesn't jeer at things, not because he hasn't the wit, but as though he hadn't time to waste on such trifles. He never listens to what is said to him. He is never interested in what interests other people at any given moment. He thinks very highly of himself, and perhaps he is right. Well, what more? I think your arrival will have a most beneficial influence upon him. God grant it may, cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna, distressed by Razumihin's account of her Radia. And Razumihin ventured to look more boldly at Avdotya Romanovna at last. He glanced at her often, while he was talking, but only for a moment, and looked away again at once. Avdotya Romanovna sat at the table, listening attentively, then got up again and began walking to and fro with her arms folded and her lips compressed, occasionally putting in a question, without stopping her walk. She had the same habit of not listening to what was said. She was wearing a dress of thin dark stuff, and she had a white transparent scarf round her neck. Razumihin soon detected signs of extreme poverty in their belongings. Had Avdotya Romanovna been dressed like a queen, he felt that he would not be afraid of her, but perhaps just because she was poorly dressed and that he noticed all the misery of her surroundings, his heart was filled with dread, and he began to be afraid of every word he uttered, every gesture he made, which was very trying for a man who already felt diffident. You've told us a great deal that is interesting about my brother's character and have told it impartially. I am glad. I thought that you were too uncritically devoted to him, observed Avdotya Romanovna with a smile. I think you are right that he needs a woman's care, she added thoughtfully. I didn't say so, but I dare say you are right, only— What? He loves no one, and perhaps he never will, Razumihin declared decisively. You mean he is not capable of love? Do you know, Avdotya Romanovna, you are awfully like your brother, in everything, truly, he blurted out suddenly to his own surprise, but remembering at once what he had just before said of her brother, he turned as red as a crab and was overcome with confusion. Avdotya Romanovna couldn't help laughing when she looked at him. You may both be mistaken about Radia, Pulcheria Alexandrovna remarked, slightly piqued. I am not talking of our present difficulty, Downia. What Pyotr Petrovitch writes in this letter and what you and I have supposed may be mistaken. But you can't imagine, Dmitri Prokofitch, how moody and, so to say, capricious he is. I never could depend on what he would do when he was only 15. And I am sure that he may do something now that nobody else would think of doing. Well, for instance, do you know how a year and a half ago he astounded me and gave me a shock that nearly killed me, when he had the idea of marrying that girl— what was her name, his landlady's daughter? Did you hear about that affair? Asked Avdotya Romanovna. Do you suppose, Pulcheria Alexandrovna continued warmly, do you suppose that my tears, my entreaties, my illness, my possible death from grief, our poverty would have made him pause? No, he would calmly have disregarded all obstacles. And yet it isn't that he doesn't love us. He has never spoken a word of that affair to me, Razumihin answered cautiously. But I did hear something from Praskovia Pavlovna herself, though she is by no means a gossip. And what I heard certainly was rather strange. And what did you hear? Both the ladies asked at once. Well, nothing very special. I only learned that the marriage, which only failed to take place through the girl's death, was not at all to Praskovia Pavlovna's liking. They say, too, the girl was not at all pretty. In fact, I am told positively ugly and such an invalid and queer. But she seems to have had some good qualities. She must have had some good qualities, or it's quite inexplicable she had no money either, and he wouldn't have considered her money, but it's always difficult to judge in such matters. I am sure she was a good girl, Avdiya Romanovna observed briefly. God forgive me, I simply rejoiced at her death. Though I don't know which of them would have caused most misery to the other, he to her or she to him, Pulcheria Alexandrovna concluded. Then she began tentatively questioning him about the scene on the previous day with Lushin, hesitating and continually glancing at Downia, obviously to the latter's annoyance. This incident more than all the rest evidently caused her uneasiness, evening consternation. Razumihin described it in detail again, but this time he added his own conclusions. He openly blamed Raskolnikov for intentionally insulting Pyotr Petrovitch, not seeking to excuse him on the score of his illness. He had planned it before his illness, he added. I think so, too, Pulcheria Alexandrovna agreed with a dejected air. But she was very much surprised at hearing Razumihin express himself so carefully, an evening with a certain respect about Pyotr Petrovitch. Avdiya Romanovna, too, was struck by it. So this is your opinion of Pyotr Petrovitch? Pulcheria Alexandrovna could not resist asking. I can have no other opinion of your daughter's future husband, Razumihin answered firmly and with warmth. And I don't say it simply from vulgar politeness, but simply because Avdiya Romanovna has of her own free will deigned to accept this man. If I spoke so rudely of him last night, it was because I was disgustingly drunk and mad besides. Yes, mad, crazy. I lost my head completely, and this morning I am ashamed of it. He crimsoned and ceased speaking. Avdiya Romanovna flushed, but did not break the silence. She had not uttered a word from the moment they began to speak of Lushin. Without her support, Pulcheria Alexandrovna obviously did not know what to do. At last, faltering and continually glancing at her daughter, she confessed that she was exceedingly worried by one circumstance. You see, Dmitri Prokofitch, she began. I'll be perfectly open with Dmitri Prokofitch, Downia. Of course, mother, said Avdiya Romanovna emphatically. This is what it is, she began in haste, as though the permission to speak of her trouble lifted a weight off her mind. Very early this morning we got a note from Pyotr Petrovitch in reply to our letter announcing our arrival. He promised to meet us at the station, you know. Instead of that, he sent a servant to bring us the address of these lodgings and to show us the way, and he sent a message that he would be here himself this morning. But this morning this note came from him. You'd better read it yourself. There is one point in it which worries me very much. You will soon see what that is, and tell me your candid opinion. Dmitri Prokofitch. You know Radia's character better than anyone, and no one can advise us better than you can. Downia, I must tell you, made her decision at once, but I still don't feel sure how to act, and I've been waiting for your opinion. Razumihin opened the note, which was dated the previous evening, and read as follows. Dear Madam, Pulcheria Alexandrovna, I have the honor to inform you that owing to unforeseen obstacles I was rendered unable to meet you at the railway station. I sent a very competent person with the same object in view. I likewise shall be deprived of the honor of an interview with you tomorrow morning by business in the Senate that does not admit of delay, and also that I may not intrude on your family circle while you are meeting your son, and Avdiya Romanovna her brother. I shall have the honor of visiting you and paying you my respects at your lodgings not later than tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock precisely, and with this I venture to present my earnest and, I may add, imperative request that Rodion Romanovich may not be present at our interview, as he offered me a gross and unprecedented affront on the occasion of my visit to him in his illness yesterday, and moreover, since I desire from you personally an indispensable and circumstantial explanation upon a certain point, in regard to which I wish to learn your own interpretation, I have the honor to inform you, in anticipation, that if, in spite of my request, I meet Rodion Romanovich, I shall be compelled to withdraw immediately, and then you have only yourself to blame. I write on the assumption that Rodion Romanovich, who appeared so ill at my visit, suddenly recovered 2 hours later, and so, being able to leave the house, may visit you also. I was confirmed in that belief by the testimony of my own eyes in the lodging of a drunken man who was run over and has since died, to whose daughter, a young woman of notorious behavior, he gave 25 rubles on the pretext of the funeral, which gravely surprised me, knowing what pains you were at to raise that sum. With this expressing my special respect to your estimable daughter, Avdotia Romanovna, I beg you to accept the respectful homage of your humble servant, P. Lushin. What am I to do now, Dmitri Prokofitch? Began Pulcheria Alexandrovna, almost weeping. How can I ask Radia not to come? Yesterday you insisted so earnestly on our refusing Pyotr Petrovitch, and now we are ordered not to receive Radia. He will come on purpose if he knows, and what will happen then? Act on Avdotia Romanovna's decision, Razumihin answered calmly at once. Though, dear me, she says goodness knows what she says. She doesn't explain her object. She says that it would be best, at least, not that it would be best, but that it's absolutely necessary that Radia should make a point of being here at 8 o'clock, and that they must meet. I didn't want evening to show him the letter, but to prevent him from coming by some stratagem with your help, because he is so irritable. Besides, I don't understand about that drunkard who died and that daughter, and how he could have given the daughter all the money which cost you such sacrifice, mother, put in Avdotia Romanovna. He was not himself yesterday, Razumihin said thoughtfully. If you only knew what he was up to in a restaurant yesterday. Though there was sense in it too. He did say something, as we were going home yesterday evening, about a dead man and a girl, but I didn't understand a word. But last night, I myself, the best thing, mother, will be for us to go to him ourselves, and there I assure you we shall see at once what's to be done. Besides, it's getting late. Good heavens, it's past 10. She cried, looking at a splendid gold-enameled watch which hung round her neck on a thin Venetian chain, and looked entirely out of keeping with the rest of her dress. A present from her fiancé, thought Razumihin. We must start, Downia, we must start, her mother cried in a flutter. He will be thinking we are still angry after yesterday, from our coming so late. Merciful heavens! While she said this she was hurriedly putting on her hat and mantle. Downia, too, put on her things. Her gloves, as Razumihin noticed, were not merely shabby but had holes in them, and yet this evident poverty gave the two ladies an air of special dignity, which is always found in people who know how to wear poor clothes. Razumihin looked reverently at Downia, and felt proud of escorting her. The queen who mended her stockings in prison, he thought, must have looked then every inch a queen, and evening more a queen than at sumptuous banquets and leaves. My God! Exclaimed Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Little did I think that I should ever fear seeing my son, my darling, darling Radia. I am afraid, Dmitri Prokofitch, she added, glancing at him timidly. Don't be afraid, mother, said Downia, kissing her. Better have faith in him. Oh, dear, I have faith in him, but I haven't slept all night, exclaimed the poor woman. They came out into the street. Do you know, Downia, when I dozed a little this morning I dreamed of Marfa Petrovna. She was all in white. She came up to me, took my hand, and shook her head at me, but so sternly as though she were blaming me. Is that a good omen? Oh, dear me, you don't know, Dmitri Prokofitch, that Marfa Petrovna's dead. No, I didn't know. Who is Marfa Petrovna? She died suddenly, and only fancy. Afterwards, mamma, put in Downia. He doesn't know who Marfa Petrovna is. Ah, you don't know? And I was thinking that you knew all about us. Forgive me, Dmitri Prokofitch. I don't know what I am thinking about these last few days. I look upon you really as a providence for us, and so I took it for granted that you knew all about us. I look on you as a relation. Don't be angry with me for saying so. Dear me, what's the matter with your right hand? Have you knocked it? Yes, I bruised it, muttered Razumihin overjoyed. I sometimes speak too much from the heart, so that Downia finds fault with me, but, dear me, what a cupboard he lives in. I wonder whether he is awake. Does this woman, his landlady, consider it a room? Listen, you say he does not like to show his feelings, so perhaps I shall annoy him with my weaknesses. Do advise me, Dmitri Prokofitch, how am I to treat him? I feel quite distracted, you know. Don't question him too much about anything if you see him frown. Don't ask him too much about his health. He doesn't like that. Ah, Dmitri Prokofitch, how hard it is to be a mother. But here are the stairs. What an awful staircase. Mother, you are quite pale. Don't distress yourself, darling, said Downia caressing her. Then with flashing eyes she added, he ought to be happy at seeing you, and you are tormenting yourself so. Wait, I'll peep in and see whether he has waked up. The ladies slowly followed Razumihin, who went on before, and when they reached the landlady's door on the fourth story, they noticed that her door was a tiny crack open and that two keen black eyes were watching them from the darkness within. Chapter 17. He is well, quite well, Zosimov cried cheerfully as they entered. He had come in 10 minutes earlier, and was sitting in the same place as before, on the sofa. Raskolnikov was sitting in the opposite corner, fully dressed and carefully washed and combed, as he had not been for some time past. The room was immediately crowded, yet Nastasia managed to follow the visitors in and stayed to listen. Raskolnikov really was almost well, as compared with his condition the day before, but he was still pale, listless, and somber. He looked like a wounded man or one who has undergone some terrible physical suffering. His brows were knitted, his lips compressed, his eyes feverish. He spoke little and reluctantly, as though performing a duty, and there was a restlessness in his movements. He only wanted a sling on his arm or a bandage on his finger to complete the impression of a man with a painful abscess or a broken arm. The pale, somber face lighted up for a moment when his mother and sister entered, but this only gave it a look of more intense suffering, in place of its listless dejection. The light soon died away, but the look of suffering remained, and Zosimov, watching and studying his patient with all the zest of a young doctor beginning to practice, noticed in him no joy at the arrival of his mother and sister, but a sort of bitter, hidden determination to bear another hour or two of inevitable torture. He saw later that almost every word of the following conversation seemed to touch on some sore place and irritate it, but at the same time he marveled at the power of controlling himself and hiding his feelings in a patient who the previous day had, like a monomaniac, fallen into a frenzy at the slightest word. Yes, I see myself now that I am almost well, said Raskolnikov, giving his mother and sister a kiss of welcome which made Pulcheria Alexandrovna radiant at once. And I don't say this as I did yesterday, he said, addressing Razumihin with a friendly pressure of his hand. Yes, truly, I am quite surprised at him today, began Zosimov, much delighted at the lady's entrance, for he had not succeeded in keeping up a conversation with his patient for 10 minutes. In another 3 or 4 days, if he goes on like this, he will be just as before, that is, as he was a month ago, or 2 or perhaps evening 3. This has been coming on for a long while, eh? Confess, now, that it has been perhaps your own fault, he added, with a tentative smile, as though still afraid of irritating him. It is very possible, answered Raskolnikov coldly. I should say, too, continued Zosimov with zest, that your complete recovery depends solely on yourself. Now that one can talk to you, I should like to impress upon you that it is essential to avoid the elementary, so to speak, fundamental causes tending to produce your morbid condition. In that case you will be cured. If not, it will go from bad to worse. These fundamental causes I don't know, but they must be known to you. You are an intelligent man, and must have observed yourself, of course. I fancy the first stage of your derangement coincides with your leaving the university. You must not be left without occupation, and so, work and a definite aim set before you may, I fancy, be very beneficial. Yes, yes, you are perfectly right. I will make haste and return to the university, and then everything will go smoothly. Zosimov, who had begun his sage advice partly to make an effect before the ladies, was certainly somewhat mystified when, glancing at his patient, he observed a mistakable mockery on his face. This lasted an instant, however. Pulcheria Alexandrovna began at once thanking Zosimov, especially for his visit to their lodging the previous night. What, he saw you last night? Raskolnikov asked, as though startled. Then you have not slept either after your journey. Radia. That was only till 2 o'clock. Downia and I never go to bed before 2 at home. I don't know how to thank him either, Raskolnikov went on, suddenly frowning and looking down. Setting aside the question of payment, forgive me for referring to it, he turned to Zosimov. I really don't know what I have done to deserve such special attention from you. I simply don't understand it, and it weighs upon me, truly, because I don't understand it. I tell you so candidly. Don't be irritated. Zosimov forced himself to laugh. Assume that you are my first patient. Well, we fellows just beginning to practice love our first patients as if they were our children, and some almost fall in love with them. And, of course, I am not rich in patience. I say nothing about him, added Raskolnikov, pointing to Razumihin, though he has had nothing from me either but insult and trouble. What nonsense he is talking. Why, you are in a sentimental mood today, are you? Shouted Razumihin. If he had had more penetration he would have seen that there was no trace of sentimentality in him, but something truly quite the opposite. But Avdotya Romanovna noticed it. She was intently and uneasily watching her brother. As for you, mother, I don't dare to speak, he went on, as though repeating a lesson learned by heart. It is only today that I have been able to realize a little how distressed you must have been here yesterday, waiting for me to come back. When he had said this, he suddenly held out his hand to his sister, smiling without a word. But in this smile there was a flash of real, unfeigned feeling. Downia caught it at once and warmly pressed his hand, overjoyed and thankful. It was the first time he had addressed her since their dispute the previous day. The mother's face lighted up with ecstatic happiness at the sight of this conclusive unspoken reconciliation. Yes, that is what I love him for, Razumihin, exaggerating it all, muttered to himself, with a vigorous turn in his chair. He has these movements, and how well he does it all, the mother was thinking to herself. What generous impulses he has, and how simply, how delicately he put an end to all the misunderstanding with his sister, simply by holding out his hand at the right minute and looking at her like that. And what fine eyes he has, and how fine his whole face is. He is evening better looking than Downia, but, good heavens, what a suit, how terribly he's dressed. Vasia, the messenger boy in Afanasy Ivanitch's shop, is better dressed. I could rush at him and hug him, weep over him, but I am afraid. Oh, dear, he's so strange. He's talking kindly, but I'm afraid. Why, what am I afraid of? Oh, Radia, you wouldn't believe, she began suddenly, in haste to answer his words to her, how unhappy Downia and I were yesterday. Now that it's all over and done with and we are quite happy again, I can tell you. Fancy, we ran here almost straight from the train to embrace you and that woman. Ah, here she is. Good morning, Nastasia. She told us at once that you were lying in a high fever and had just run away from the doctor in delirium, and they were looking for you in the streets. You can't imagine how we felt. I couldn't help thinking of the tragic end of Lieutenant Pottenchikov, a friend of your father's. You can't remember him, Radia, who ran out in the same way in a high fever and fell into the well in the courtyard, and they couldn't pull him out till next day. Of course, we exaggerated things. We were on the point of rushing to find Fyodor Petrovitch to ask him to help because we were alone, utterly alone, she said plaintively, and stopped short, suddenly recollecting it was still somewhat dangerous to speak of Fyodor Petrovitch, although we are quite happy again. Yes, of course it's very annoying, Raskolnikov muttered in reply. but with such a preoccupied and inattentive air that Downia gazed at him in perplexity. What else was it I wanted to say? He went on, trying to recollect. Oh, yes, mother, and you too, Downia. Please don't think that I didn't mean to come and see you today and was waiting for you to come first. What are you saying, Radia? Cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna. She, too, was surprised. Is he answering us as a duty? Downia wondered. Is he being reconciled and asking forgiveness as though he were performing a rite or repeating a lesson? I've only just waked up and wanted to go to you, but was delayed owing to my clothes. I forgot yesterday to ask her Nastasa to wash out the blood. I've only just dressed. Blood? What blood? Pulcheria Alexandrovna asked in alarm. Oh, nothing. Don't be uneasy. It was when I was wandering about yesterday, rather delirious. I chanced upon a man who had been run over clerk. Delirious? But you remember everything, Razumihin interrupted. That's true, Raskolnikov answered with special carefulness. I remember everything evening to the slightest detail, and yet, why I did that and went there and said that, I can't clearly explain now. A familiar phenomenon, interposed Zosimov. Actions are sometimes performed in a masterly and most cunning way, while the direction of the actions is deranged and dependent on various morbid impressions. It's like a dream. Perhaps it's a good thing really that he should think me almost a madman, thought Raskolnikov. Why, people in perfect health act in the same way too, observed Downia, looking uneasily at Zosimov. There is some truth in your observation, the latter replied. In that sense we are certainly all not infrequently like madmen, but with the slight difference that the deranged are somewhat madder, for we must draw a line. A normal man, it is true, hardly exists. Among dozens, perhaps hundreds of thousands, hardly one is to be met with. At the word madman, carelessly dropped by Zosimov in his chatter on his favorite subject, everyone frowned. Raskolnikov sat seeming not to pay attention, plunged in thought with a strange smile on his pale lips. He was still meditating on something. Well, what about the man who was run over? I interrupted you, Razumihin cried hastily. What? Raskolnikov seemed to wake up. Oh, I got spattered with blood helping to carry him to his lodging. By the way, Mamma, I did an unpardonable thing yesterday. I was literally out of my mind. I gave away all the money you sent me to his wife for the funeral. She's a widow now, in consumption, a poor creature, 3 little children, starving, nothing in the house. There's a daughter, 2. Perhaps you'd have given it yourself if you'd seen them. But I had no right to do it, I admit, especially as I knew how you needed the money yourself. To help others one must have the right to do it, or else creves, chines, see vous and trespass contents. He laughed. That's right, isn't it, Downia? No, it's not, answered Downia firmly. Bah! You, too, have ideals, he muttered, looking at her almost with hatred, and smiling sarcastically. I ought to have considered that. Well, that's praiseworthy, and it's better for you, and if you reach a line you won't overstep. You will be unhappy, and if you overstep it, maybe you will be still unhappier. But all that's nonsense, he added irritably, vexed at being carried away. I only meant to say that I beg your forgiveness, mother, he concluded, shortly and abruptly. That's enough, Radia. I am sure that everything you do is very good, said his mother, delighted. Don't be too sure, he answered, twisting his mouth into a smile. A silence followed. There was a certain constraint in all this conversation, and in the silence, and in the reconciliation, and in the forgiveness, and all were feeling it. It is as though they were afraid of me, Raskolnikov was thinking to himself, looking askance at his mother and sister. Pulcheria Alexandrovna was truly growing more timid the longer she kept silent. Yet in their absence I seemed to love them so much, flashed through his mind. Do you know, Radia, Marfa Petrovna is dead, Pulcheria Alexandrovna suddenly blurted out. What Marfa Petrovna? Oh, mercy on us, Marfa Petrovna Svidrigailov. I wrote you so much about her. Yes, I remember, so she's dead. Oh, really? He roused himself suddenly, as if waking up. What did she die of? Only imagine. Quite suddenly, Pulcheria Alexandrovna answered hurriedly, encouraged by his curiosity. On the very day I was sending you that letter, would you believe it? That awful man seems to have been the cause of her death. They say he beat her dreadfully. Why were they on such bad terms? He asked, addressing his sister. Not at all, quite the contrary, truly. With her, he was always very patient, considerate evening. In fact, all those 7 years of their married life he gave way to her. Too much so truly, in many cases. All of a sudden he seems to have lost patience. Then he could not have been so awful if he controlled himself for 7 years. You seem to be defending him, Downia. No, no, he's an awful man. I can imagine nothing more awful. Downia answered, almost with a shudder, knitting her brows and sinking into thought. That had happened in the morning. Pulcheria Alexandrovna went on hurriedly, and directly afterwards she ordered the horses to be harnessed to drive to the town immediately after dinner. She always used to drive to the town in such cases. She ate a very good dinner, I am told, after the beating. That was always her habit, and immediately after dinner, so as not to be late in starting, she went to the bathhouse. You see, she was undergoing some treatment with baths. They have a cold spring there, and she used to bathe in it regularly every day, and no sooner had she got into the water when she suddenly had a stroke. I should think so, said Zosimov. And did he beat her badly? What does that matter? Put in Downia. But I don't know why you want to tell us such gossip, mother, said Raskolnikov irritably, as it were in spite of himself. Ah, my dear, I don't know what to talk about, broke from Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Why, are you all afraid of me? He asked, with a constrained smile. That's certainly true, said Downia, looking directly and sternly at her brother. Mother was crossing herself with terror as she came up the stairs. His face worked as though in convulsion. What are you saying, Downia? Don't be angry, please, Radia. Why did you say that, Downia? Pulcheria Alexandrovna began, overwhelmed. You see, coming here, I was dreaming all the way, in the train, how we should meet, how we should talk over everything together, and I was so happy, I did not notice the journey. But what am I saying? I am happy now. You should not, Downia. I am happy now, simply in seeing you, Radia. Hush, mother, he muttered in confusion, not looking at her, but pressing her hand. We shall have time to speak freely of everything. As he said this, he was suddenly overwhelmed with confusion and turned pale. Again, that awful sensation he had known of late passed with deadly chill over his soul. Again it became suddenly plain and perceptible to him that he had just told a fearful lie, that he would never now be able to speak freely of everything, that he would never again be able to speak of anything to anyone. The anguish of this thought was such that for a moment he almost forgot himself. He got up from his seat, and not looking at anyone walked towards the door. What are you about? Cried Razumihin, clutching him by the arm. He sat down again, and began looking about him, in silence. They were all looking at him in perplexity. But what are you all so dull for? He shouted, suddenly and quite unexpectedly. Do say something. What's the use of sitting like this? Come, do speak. Let us talk. We meet together and sit in silence. Come, anything. Thank God. I was afraid the same thing as yesterday was beginning again, said Pulcheria Alexandrovna, crossing herself. What is the matter, Rada? Asked Avdiya Romanovna, distrustfully. Oh, nothing. I remembered something, he answered, and suddenly laughed. Well, if you remembered something, that's all right. I was beginning to think, muttered Zosimov, getting up from the sofa. It is time for me to be off. I will look in again perhaps if I can. He made his bows and went out. What an excellent man, observed Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Yes, excellent, splendid, well-educated, intelligent, Raskolnikov began, suddenly speaking with surprising rapidity and a liveliness he had not shown till then. I can't remember where I met him before my illness. I believe I have met him somewhere, and this is a good man, too. He nodded at Razumihin. Do you like him, Downia? He asked her, and suddenly, for some unknown reason, laughed. Very much, answered Downia. Phew, what a pig you are, Razumihin protested, blushing in terrible confusion, and he got up from his chair. Pulcheria Alexandrovna smiled faintly, but Raskolnikov laughed aloud. Where are you off to? I must go. You need not at all. Stay, Sosimov has gone, so you must. Don't go. What's the time? Is it 12 o'clock? What a pretty watch you have got, Downia. But why are you all silent again? I do all the talking. It was a present from Marfa Petrovna, answered Downia. And a very expensive one, added Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Eyal, what a big one, hardly like a lady's. I like that sort, said Downia. So it is not a present from her fiancé, thought Razumihin, and was unreasonably delighted. I thought it was Luzhin's present, observed Raskolnikov. No, he has not made Downia any presents yet. Eyal, and do you remember, mother, I was in love and wanted to get married, he said suddenly, looking at his mother, who was disconcerted by the sudden change of subject and the way he spoke of it. Oh, yes, my dear. Pulcheria Alexandrovna exchanged glances with Downia and Razumihin. Yes. What shall I tell you? I don't remember much truly. She was such a sickly girl, he went on, growing dreamy and looking down again, quite an invalid. She was fond of giving alms to the poor, and was always dreaming of a nunnery, and once she burst into tears when she began talking to me about it. Yes, I remember. I remember very well. She was an ugly little thing. I really don't know what drew me to her then. I think it was because she was always ill. If she had been lame or hunchback, I believe I should have liked her better still, he smiled dreamily. Yes, it was a sort of spring delirium. No, it was not only spring delirium, said Downia, with warm feeling. He fixed a strained, intent look on his sister, but did not hear or did not understand her words. Then, completely lost in thought, he got up, went up to his mother, kissed her, went back to his place and sat down. You love her evening now, said Pulcheria Alexandrovna, touched. Her? Now? Oh, yes, you ask about her? No, that's all now, as it were, in another world and so long ago. And truly everything happening here seems somehow far away. He looked attentively at them. Now I seem to be looking at you from 1,000 miles away, but goodness knows why we are talking of that. And what's the use of asking about it? He added with annoyance, and biting his nails, fell into dreamy silence again. What a wretched lodging you have, Radia. It's like a tomb, said Pulcheria Alexandrovna, suddenly breaking the oppressive silence. I am sure it's quite half through your lodging you have become so melancholy. My lodging, he answered, listlessly. Yes, the lodging had a great deal to do with it. I thought that, too, if only you knew. Though, what a strange thing you said just now, mother, he said, laughing strangely. A little more, and their companionship, this mother and the sister, with him after 3 years' absence, this intimate tone of conversation, in face of the utter impossibility of really speaking about anything, would have been beyond his power of endurance. But there was one urgent matter, which must be settled one way or the other that day, so he had decided when he woke. Now he was glad to remember it as a means of escape. Listen, Downia, he began, gravely and dryly. Of course I beg your pardon for yesterday, but I consider it my duty to tell you again that I do not withdraw from my chief point. It is me or Luzhin. If I'm a scoundrel, you must not be. One is enough. If you marry Luzhin, I cease at once to look on you as a sister. Radia, it is the same as yesterday again, Pulcheria Alexandrovna cried, mournfully. And why do you call yourself a scoundrel? I can't bear it. You said the same yesterday. Brother, Downia answered firmly and with the same dryness. In all this there is a mistake on your part. I thought it over at night, and found out the mistake. It is all because you seem to fancy I am sacrificing myself to someone and for someone. That is not the case at all. I am simply marrying for my own sake, because things are hard for me. Though, of course, I shall be glad if I succeed in being useful to my family. But that is not the chief motive for my decision. She is lying, he thought to himself, biting his nails vindictively. Proud creature. She won't admit she wants to do it out of charity. Too haughty. Oh, base characters. They evening love as though they hate. Oh, how I hate them all. In fact, continued Downia, I am marrying Pyotr Petrovitch because of two evils I choose the less. I intend to do honestly all he expects of me, so I am not deceiving him. Why did you smile just now? She, too, flushed, and there was a gleam of anger in her eyes. All, he asked, with a malignant grin, within certain limits. Both the manner and form of Pyotr Petrovitch's courtship showed me at once what he wanted. He may, of course, think too well of himself, but I hope he esteems me. To why are you laughing again? And why are you blushing again? You are lying, sister. You are intentionally lying, simply from feminine obstinacy, simply to hold your own against me. You cannot respect Lushan. I have seen him and talked with him, so you are selling yourself for money, and so in any case you are acting basely, and I am glad at least that you can blush for it. It is not true. I am not lying, cried Downia, losing her composure. I would not marry him if I were not convinced that he esteems me and thinks highly of me. I would not marry him if I were not firmly convinced that I can respect him. Fortunately, I can have convincing proof of it this very day, and such a marriage is not a vileness, as you say. And evening, if you were right, if I really had determined on a vile action, is it not merciless on your part to speak to me like that? Why do you demand of me a heroism that perhaps you have not either? It is despotism. It is tyranny. If I ruin anyone, it is only myself. I am not committing a murder. Why do you look at me like that? Why are you so pale? Radia, darling, what's the matter? Good heavens, you have made him faint, cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna. No, no, nonsense. It's nothing. A little giddiness, not fainting. You have fainting on the brain. H.S. What was I saying? Oh, yes. In what way will you get convincing proof today that you can respect him, and that he esteems you, as you said? I think you said today? Mother, show Radia Pyotr Petrovitch's letter, said Downia, with trembling hands. Pulcheria Alexandrovna gave him the letter. He took it with great interest, but, before opening it, he suddenly looked with a sort of wonder at Downia. It is strange, he said, slowly, as though struck by a new idea. What am I making such a fuss for? What is it all about? Marry whom you like. He said this as though to himself, but said it aloud and looked for some time at his sister, as though puzzled. He opened the letter at last, still with the same look of strange wonder on his face. Then, slowly and attentively, he began reading, and read it through twice. Pulcheria Alexandrovna showed marked anxiety, and all truly expected something particular. What surprises me, he began, after a short pause, handing the letter to his mother, but not addressing anyone in particular, is that he is a businessman, a lawyer, and his conversation is pretentious truly, and yet he writes such an uneducated letter. They all started. They had expected something quite different, but they all write like that, you know, Razumihin observed, abruptly. Have you read it? Yes. We showed him, Radia. We consulted him just now, Pulcheria Alexandrovna began, embarrassed. That's just the jargon of the courts, Razumihin put in. Legal documents are written like that to this day. Legal, yes, it's just legal, business language, not so very uneducated, and not quite educated, business language. Pyotr Petrovitch makes no secret of the fact that he had a cheap education. He is proud truly of having made his own way, Avdidir Romanovna observed, somewhat offended by her brother's tone. Well, if he's proud of it, he has reason. I don't deny it. You seem to be offended, sister, at my making only such a frivolous criticism on the letter, and to think that I speak of such trifling matters on purpose to annoy you. It is quite the contrary. An observation apropos of the style occurred to me that is by no means irrelevant as things stand. There is one expression, blame yourselves, put in very significantly and plainly, and there is besides a threat that he will go away at once if I am present. That threat to go away is equivalent to a threat to abandon you both if you are disobedient, and to abandon you now after summoning you to Petersburg. Well, what do you think? Can one resent such an expression from Lushin, as we should if he pointed to Razumihin had written it, or Zosimov, or one of us? And no, answered Downia, with more animation. I saw clearly that it was too naively expressed, and that perhaps he simply has no skill in writing that is a true criticism. Brother, I did not expect, truly. It is expressed in legal style, and sounds coarser than perhaps he intended. But I must disillusion you a little. There is one expression in the letter, one slander about me, and rather a contemptible one. I gave the money last night to the widow, a woman in consumption, crushed with trouble, and not on the pretext of the funeral, but simply to pay for the funeral, and not to the daughter, a young woman, as he writes, of notorious behavior whom I saw last night for the first time in my life, but to the widow. In all this I see a too hasty desire to slander me and to raise dissension between us. It is expressed again in legal jargon, that is to say, with a too obvious display of the aim, and with a very knave eagerness. He is a man of intelligence, but to act sensibly, intelligence is not enough. It all shows the man, and I don't think he has a great esteem for you. I tell you this simply to warn you, because I sincerely wish for your good. Downia did not reply. Her resolution had been taken. She was only awaiting the evening. Then what is your decision, Radia? Asked Pulcheria Alexandrovna, who was more uneasy than ever at the sudden, new business-like tone of his talk. What decision? You see, Pyotr Petrovitch writes that you are not to be with us this evening, and that he will go away if you come. So will you come? That, of course, is not for me to decide, but for you first, if you are not offended by such a request, and secondly, by Downia, if she, too, is not offended. I will do what you think best, he added, dryly. Downia has already decided, and I fully agree with her. Pulcheria Alexandrovna hastened to declare. I decided to ask you, Radia, to urge you not to fail to be with us at this interview, said Downia. Will you come? Yes, I will ask you, too, to be with us at 8 o'clock, she said, addressing Razumihin. Mother, I am inviting him, too. Quite right, Downia. Well, since you have decided, added Pulcheria Alexandrovna, so be it. I shall feel easier myself. I do not like concealment and deception. Better let us have the whole truth.